Chapter 30-35. Her master's request was not excessive. After all, it involved Xie Fenglu. He was sect Master Ziyun's beloved disciple and Ji Xinyue's favorite junior brother. If news of this spread in advance, it would definitely set off a huge wave in the entire Fanine continent. Xie Fenglu would be hunted down by all the immortals in the Fanine continent. If it was proven that Xie Fenglu was wronged and that he was not Xie Juk, then it would be too unfair to him. No one would spread the news just because they suspected that their family had committed a crime. Therefore, sect Master Ziyun's request was very reasonable, and Ji Xinyue would do the same. If she wasn't facing her most trusted master this time, she wouldn't have said it. She nodded and naturally agreed. Sect Master Ziyun patted her shoulder. No matter what, there will be a result tomorrow. You're also tired, go back and rest well. Only when you have recovered your spirit can you share my worries. Sect Master Ziyun turned and left. The sun was already halfway down, and his back had an inexplicable sense of desolation. Ji Xinyue held the half-drunk cup of tea and sat there for a while before standing up. As soon as she stood up, her body swayed slightly. Then she slowly fell down. A figure flashed from the darkness and caught her as she was about to fall to the ground. He lifted her up and looked down at her, a complicated look in his eyes. Xinyu, you're too tired. You should rest well. Master has no other choice. No matter what, Master will not harm you. I will ensure your safety and not let you suffer any real harm. Go to sleep. When you wake up, you will find that this world is still the same as before. Nothing has changed. Ji Xinyue laid in his arms, her long eyelashes slightly closed. She had completely fallen asleep. It was already late at night, and a few stars fell from the sky. There was only one entrance to the Beast Valley. The other places were all cliffs and were sealed by layers of barriers, so there was no way to enter or exit. At the entrance of the Beast Valley was a shiny golden mirror. The mirror had complicated spell patterns on it, and layers of light flashed on the surface of the mirror. This mirror was the famous demon-revealing mirror in the Fanine continent. Once a demonic creature entered or exited the valley, this mirror would alarm and emit thousands of rays of golden light, more beautiful than fireworks. Because of this mirror, people didn't have to worry about any monsters sneaking in and out of the valley. This demon-revealing mirror was sect Master Ziyun's most prized possession. Over the years that he had been in possession of this mirror, countless devils who had disguised themselves as ordinary people had been exposed and killed by the immortals. When the mirror was mentioned, the immortals of the Sanine continent all praised it. However, the people of the Devil Dao hated and feared the mirror. They did everything they could to destroy it. Over the years, there were a few devils who risked their lives to steal the mirror and destroy it, but they all died before they could succeed. They were all killed by the sect Master Ziyun, who was jealous of the devils and had powerful magic power. After a while, no one dared to have any ideas about the mirror anymore. Tonight, it was Ji Xinyue's third senior brother's turn to guard the mirror. This third senior brother had always been cautious and conscientious in his work. As long as it was a task given to him, he would definitely complete it with quality and quantity. He would never go off on his own to fool others. Just like now, on the eve of the great battle, all the participants had already rested. Both the inside and outside of the valley were quiet. Only the occasional long howl of the beasts in the Beast Valley made the night seem even quieter and deeper. Third senior brother sat on a blue stone at the entrance of the valley. Although he was very tired, he was still full of energy. Chapter 30-36. The four disciples he was most proud of were by his side. The few of them had been chatting to get rid of their sleepiness, and naturally, they talked about the blood-sucking monster. They were all guessing what the blood-sucking monster looked like. The young disciples' imagination was abnormally rich. They imagined the blood-sucking monster to have all kinds of ferocious appearances, such as 3 heads and 6 arms, a head like a basket, and fangs that were a few feet long. A gust of wind suddenly blew from afar, brushing past them and blowing straight into the Beast Valley. The night wind was rather cold, and these disciples were in the middle of discussing terrifying things. When the wind blew, they shivered. A disciple crossed his arms and looked at the entrance of the valley. Why did I feel like something flew past just now? When he said this, everyone felt goosebumps appear on their skin. No way? No way. I didn't see anything? Could it be that the other party used an invisibility technique? Third senior brother was a little absent-minded just now. When he heard the disciple's words, he first looked at the demon-revealing mirror. There was nothing unusual on it. He waved his hand. Don't make wild guesses. What kind of person is there? It's impossible for people from the celestial world to enter this valley with invisibility. If a demon wants to enter or leave, regardless of whether he's invisible or not, this mirror will warn him. What just blew past was just a gust of wind. The disciples heaved a sigh of relief and stopped talking about the previous topic. Instead, they started to gossip about men. Third senior brother was a little absent-minded as he looked at the demon-revealing mirror. When that gust of wind blew past, there was a faint fragrance. It seemed to be the fragrance on little junior sister's body, but it shouldn't be little junior sister, right? Didn't she already rest? He knew from the other disciples that little junior sister had returned, and he excitedly ran to her courtyard to visit her. However, he met his master at the entrance of the courtyard. Sect Master Ziyun told him that Ji Xinyue was tired from the journey and had suffered some injuries. She was resting now and asked him not to disturb her. If there was anything else, he should wait until tomorrow. Since his master said so, he could only return. Did he miss little junior sister too much? So when a gust of wind blew past, he could smell little junior sister's scent. He sighed and continued to sit there and guard. However, knowing that little junior sister had returned, he was even more confident in winning tomorrow's battle. Who was little junior sister? Her avatar was Xinyu, one of the top 3 experts in the Fanine continent. She was a classic example of the student surpassing the master. Her martial arts were even slightly stronger than the sect head of Ziyun. With her back, what demons and ghosts couldn't be exterminated? The Beast Valley was filled with mountains and dense forests. A black shadow shuttled back and forth in the valley as if it was looking for something. Suddenly, the black shadow stopped at a mountain ridge. In the night, her eyes were as deep as the stars. This person was Ji Xinyu. She had never thought that her master, whom she had always trusted and loved her like a father, would plot against her. Therefore, when she was chatting with her master, she did drink the tea that her master had spiked. It was only when she stood up and felt dizzy that she realized that something was wrong. Fortunately, when he was with Rongyue Tunlan, he had taught her the kung fu to cure the knockout drug. Therefore, she immediately activated that kung fu at the moment when she was about to faint. Once this kung fu was activated, it would not stop even if the person was unconscious. Sect Master Ziyun's knockout drug was supposed to make her sleep for a day and a night, but she only slept for 4 hours before waking up. Chapter 30-37. When she woke up, she was a little confused, but she reacted quickly. She was stunned for a moment and didn't know what to feel. She first sensed her body. Her inner breath was normal, and all her physiological functions were normal. She even felt that the blood in her body was more active. In other words, the drug that her master gave her only had the effect of making her unconscious. It wouldn't cause any harm to her body, and even had the effect of nourishing her blood. Before she fainted, she vaguely heard her master's words. She didn't hear the whole thing, but she still heard the sentence, "I won't let you suffer any harm." It seemed that he really didn't want to harm her, but why did he drug her for no reason? Did he not want her to think too much and nourish her spirit? Or was her master hiding something important from her? Or was her master from the demonic sect? When the last thought popped up, she immediately pushed it back down. How could it be? Her master hated the demonic sect the most. He would kill everyone he saw. Who knew how many demons had died in his hands over the years? How could he be from the demonic sect? Anyone could be from the demonic sect, but her master couldn't be. She must be crazy to think of this possibility, but her master's original attitude towards the demonic disciples was that he would rather kill 1,000 by mistake than let one go. But now, Xiao Jiao was obviously a big suspect, yet her master could calmly analyze and deal with it. Was it because Xiao Jiao was his beloved disciple? He didn't believe that his disciple was a demon, so he could calm down and investigate thoroughly? The more Ji Xinyu thought about it, the more her head hurt. She subconsciously didn't want to suspect her master. Maybe her master did have other secrets? And he didn't want her to worry about these secrets, so, although she kept comforting herself, she was still a little nervous. She felt that something big was about to happen, but she couldn't find any clues. She thought of Rong Yuetonlan and her heart moved. He was the only one who knew part of the inside story, and he had always been meticulous. Maybe she should discuss it with him. She was the kind of person who would do what she thought. She immediately took out her voice transmission talisman, but when she took it out, she was stunned. Her other voice transmission talismans were all there, but the blue one that contacted Rong Yuetonlan was missing. She didn't give up and looked through the storage space again. She even searched every nook and cranny, but she still couldn't find the voice transmission talisman. Could it be that he had accidentally lost the voice transmission talisman when he took it out to check last time? That's impossible, right? She clearly remembered that she had personally put the voice transmission talisman into her storage space. As for the things that were placed in the storage space, unless someone with a stronger psychokinesis came to retrieve them, it was impossible for them to lose it. She searched her room again and even searched every nook and cranny of her bed, but there was no sign of the voice transmission talisman. She finally gave up. It seemed like she had lost it. Her gaze landed on the blood-red sound transmitting talisman. This belonged to Rong Yuetion. Could she use it to contact him? She immediately tried to activate the red sound transmitting talisman, but after a while, the red sound transmitting talisman didn't budge at all. It was obvious that this was a special kind of sound transmitting talisman, which couldn't be activated by ordinary means. If it wasn't her own voice transmission talisman, it would be super troublesome to use. She would need to decipher some things. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to decipher it without 6 to 10 hours. Moreover, she didn't know who was connected to the other side. Perhaps it was one of Rong Yuetionlan's friends. Chapter 3038. Now was not the time to study this. She threw the sound transmission talisman back into the storage space and decided to rely on herself. She was an expert at finding clues. When she was roaming the Jianghu, she had helped the government solve some difficult cases, so she had experience. Since this kind of accident happened in the Beast Valley, there must be some clues left in the valley. She had to go look for them. She stood up and looked outside, and found that there were disciples patrolling outside her courtyard. She didn't want to suspect her master, but at this moment, she was still a little cautious, so she made some arrangements in her room before she went out. With her current martial arts, it wasn't too difficult to sneak into the Beast Valley without anyone noticing. A superb invisibility technique would do the trick. The sky was very dark, and only a few stars twinkled. But her night vision was excellent, and looking for clues was no different from looking in the daytime. The situation here was very different from what she had heard from her martial nephews. More than half of the animals here were gone, 2/3 of them. And the ones that were missing were all abnormally fierce beasts. Because the animals here were gifts that sect Master Ziyun received for his birthday, they were all intelligent, and some were even about to cultivate into humans. The last time she came, she had seen a few fierce beasts that had already taken over the mountains as kings. They came and went with the wind, lightning flashed, and thunder roared. But now, not a single one of these fierce beasts could be seen. Occasionally, a young wolf or something would jump out from the grass, and after looking at her in shock like a rabbit, it would quickly disappear into the forest. The air was faintly filled with resentment, and the mountain wind whistled, as if the resentful spirits of the fierce beasts were crying. Ji Xinyu went straight to the shadow of the mountain, where there was a beast that she had been thinking about. Ji Xinyu arrived at an extremely remote corner. There was a cave here. The cave was narrow, only enough for a child to enter. The path inside the cave twisted and turned, and at the end of the cave was a crystal world. There were rows of black crystals of various heights, and in the middle of these crystals, a little fox had once been trapped, a little fox with ink-black fur. When Ji Xinyu was young, she accidentally entered the Beast Valley and was chased by a fierce beast, so she hid in this cave. Who would have thought that the ferocious beast had already transformed into its human form, and had actually shrunk its body and chased after them? At that time, Ji Xinyu had no way out, and had frantically run all the way into the crystal cave. In the end, when the ferocious beast reached the entrance of the cave, It seemed to have smelled something dangerous and turned around to run away. Ji Xinyue's life was saved. At that time, she was also on tenterhooks. She thought that there was some ferocious beast hiding here, but she didn't dare to go out. She was sure that the beast that chased her was still waiting outside, eyeing her covetously. Just as he was feeling conflicted, he heard snoring coming from the crystal pillar not far away. Children were all curious. She carried her little heart and slowly walked over to take a look. In the end, she saw a little black fox. It was the size of a puppy, curled up and sleeping soundly. Children had no immunity to these furry and round little animals, so Ji Xinyue couldn't help but move closer. She didn't expect that her feet would be uneven, so she tripped and directly pounced on the little fox like a hungry tiger pouncing on its prey. The little fox was woken up by her. It opened its pitch-black and watery eyes and looked at her. It even let out a spoiled whimper, which directly melted Ji Xinyue's little heart. Chapter 30-39. Thus, she and the little fox stayed in the crystal cave for half a day and became good friends. She smoothed the little fox's fur and told it her stories. The little fox just lay there and listened to her attentively. She didn't know if it understood her. After half a day, Ji Xinyue guessed that the beast had left. She also remembered that her master was looking for her, so she wanted to leave. She couldn't bear to part with the little fox and wanted to take it away. However, after carrying it for a few steps, the little fox in her arms would be pulled back to its original place by an unknown force once it exceeded a certain distance. Later, Ji Xinyue found that the little fox's front paw was tied to a thin chain as thick as a hair. She thought of all ways to break the chain but couldn't. In the end, she could only solemnly promise the little fox that she would think of a way to help it regain its freedom. The little fox looked at her with a pair of teary eyes and even used its little paw to grab a strand of fur to give her as a gift. After she kept the fox's fur, she reluctantly said goodbye to the little fox. It was strange. When she entered the valley, no matter how careful she was, she still encountered many man-eating beasts. However, when she left the valley, those beasts fled in all directions when she arrived. The beast that had chased her before had been guarding the entrance of the cave. When she came out, it pounced directly at her. However, before it could reach her, it suddenly turned around and ran as if it had been greatly frightened. It ran without knowing where it was going and even hit a big rock and broke its leg. She smoothly left the valley. After she left, she was locked up by her master for a month because she had broken into the forbidden area. A month later, when she came out to chat with her master, she learned from her master that the chain was called the meteoric iron chain. It was a kind of immortal treasure. Other than the owner of the meteoric iron chain, if anyone wanted to break the chain, they would have to find a divine weapon that was also made of meteoric iron. There wasn't a single divine weapon made of meteoric iron in the entire Sanine continent, so Ji Xinyue could only temporarily give up on the idea of saving the little fox. Because of the strict management of the Purple Cloud sect, Ji Xinyue couldn't go to the Beast Valley for a long time. When she could go again, she had already grown into a slender girl. She found the cave and the little fox. At that time, the little fox was in a coma, curled up into a fur ball and snoring loudly. She couldn't wake it up. She tried to break the chain again, but to no avail. Over the years, she had sneaked into the Beast Valley more than a dozen times. Every time she went in to see the little fox, it was snoring loudly, as if sleeping away 1,000 worries. Because Ji Xinyue had not been able to find a weapon forged from meteoric iron, she had not been able to bring it out. Under normal circumstances, the things trapped by immortal magical artifacts were usually extremely ferocious fiendish demons. Later on, when Ji Xinyue became sensible, she had also thought that this little fox might be a devil, but she had tested it several times and did not find any devil chi on its body. Moreover, the little fox looked adorable and had kindly given her a strand of fur to use as an amulet, so it shouldn't be something ominous. At most, she would be the king of the beasts, because as long as she wore this strand of hair, all the beasts in the mountains would flee at the mere sight of her. The reason she fought for the moon god sword this time was to save this little fox. Right now, she was thinking about it the most, but even after searching through the entire crystal cave, she still couldn't find the little fox. Even the chain was gone. There were only 3 possibilities for such a situation to occur. First, the little fox had finally been rescued by someone and was now hiding somewhere in the valley. Chapter 30-40. Second, it was the king of beasts and had been eaten by that blood-sucking monster. Third, it was that blood-sucking monster and had finally regained its freedom. She carefully searched the crystal cave for a while. The little fox shouldn't be able to break free from that chain. If it had been cut off by someone, then there should be another piece of chain on the ground. Ji Xinyu had already dug 3 feet into the ground, but she couldn't find the broken chain. There was only one possibility for this to happen: the meteoric iron chain had been broken by its original owner. Since the meteoric iron chain was an immortal treasure, then its owner should be an immortal, right? Could it be that the little fox was fated to have this tribulation, and now that the tribulation was over, that person had broken it? Countless thoughts spun in her mind, but she couldn't find an answer. The moon god's sword came out of her storage space. I can smell the meteoric iron chain's aura. Ji Xinyu's eyes lit up and she pulled it out. Then smell if anyone else has been here. Also smell the little fox's aura and follow its aura to find where it is. Moon god's sword. Are you treating me like a hunting dog? Ji Xinyu immediately stroked its fur. Darling, you're much more precious than a hunting dog. I never thought that you would have this kind of skill. You're truly too skilled. The moon god's sword was very obedient. It felt very comfortable with praise. Especially when Ji Xinyu called it darling, it immediately felt good, but it still proudly said, I'm a divine sword, don't call me something so corny. While it was filling Ji Xinyu's mind, it leisurely walked around the crystal cave and then reported to Ji Xinyu. Xie Fenglu and Huang Qinglu came here. There's their aura here. Ji Xinyu's fingers slightly trembled. Then, where's the little fox? The moon god's sword shook its tip and circled around where the little fox had been. Strange, the little fox didn't have any aura, it didn't move at all. It disappeared into thin air. There were only 2 possibilities for it to disappear into thin air. One was that it had been eaten by someone, and the other was that the little fox had turned into a human. Ji Xinyu took in a breath. Let's go out and take a look. After leaving the cave, the moon god's sword told her that there was only a stranger's aura, not the little fox or Xie Fengliu's. Stranger? Yes, that stranger's aura is very strange, as if he is somewhat weak. He was carried away by Huang Qinglu. Ji Xinyu immediately ordered the moon god's sword. Then follow their qi and see where they went. The sensitivity of the moon god's sword to aura was 10,000 times stronger than a hunting dog. Actually, Huang and Xie had already left for a few days, and the smell of this place had already been completely blown away by the mountain wind. No matter how powerful a hunting dog was, it would not be able to find people based on smell, but the moon god's sword was able to easily find them. A quarter of an hour later, it had followed the aura and brought Ji Xinyu to a hillside. The location of this hillside was actually very well hidden. It was surrounded by mountain peaks on all sides, and was a standard basin. If not for the moon god's sword leading the way, Ji Xinyu would definitely not have found this place. And here, Ji Xinyu found a few bee skeletons. Because the surrounding mountain peaks were like a screen, even the wind couldn't blow in. Therefore, these skeletons stood there quietly, as if they had been frozen by time. Chapter 30-41. Master, they died 7 days ago. Moon god's sword reported. Ji Xinyu nodded. That was when Huang and Xie returned to the Purple Cloud sect. Moon god's sword flew to the center of the hill and turned around. After Huang Qinglu brought the stranger here, he put him here. Ji Xinyu patted the sword's hilt to encourage it. It was so considerate to have this sword by her side. It helped her a lot and saved her a lot of trouble. She looked around and her heart skipped a beat. Those skeletons seemed to be standing in a disorderly manner, but upon closer inspection, they seemed to be standing in some kind of formation. She carefully compared them and her heart sank. These skeletons were standing in 6 different directions, faintly forming the shape of a hexagram. And looking at their movements, they seemed to be attacking the center of the hexagram before stopping. Their flesh and blood were sucked dry, leaving only skin and bones. Ji Xinyu suddenly felt a great sense of panic. She seemed to have understood something, but she couldn't believe it. Her fingers trembled slightly. She quickly checked the skeletons and recognized their species. These species were all different. There was a dual-winged salamander, a single-winged black lion, a flood dragon, and even a bird that looked like a vermilion bird. It was obvious that the bird was of the fire attribute, and the flood dragon was of the water attribute. As for the dual-winged salamander, it was a gift from Ji Xinyue to his master. He had fought with it before, and knew that it was of the earth attribute. The single-winged black lion was of the metal attribute. These animals were of different attributes and stood in different positions. They were all standing in positions that were beneficial to their attributes. For example, the bird stood in the south. It was of the fire attribute. Ji Xinyu suppressed the panic in her heart and checked the overall shape of the hill. Her body trembled slightly. This hill was very similar to the Purple Cloud sect's martial arts field. The only difference was that the hill was filled with colorful stones, while the Purple Cloud sect was paved with colorful jade stones. Of course, if one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't find any similarities between the two. After all, one was as exquisite as the Jade Lake, while the other was just an irregular hill. Ji Xinyu's eyes flashed with the martial arts field's formation. It was also a hexagram, and the disciples of different attributes stood in different positions. That array was exactly the same as the one formed by the ferocious beasts on the hillside. These ferocious beasts were already psychic. Some of their intelligence was even higher than a human's, and some of them could even transform. They could summon the wind, rain, and lightning. However, their intelligence was different after all. The probability of them automatically forming a formation to attack people was almost zero. Furthermore, even someone as knowledgeable as Ji Xinyu had never seen the ancient array before, so it was even more impossible for these beasts to have seen it. There was only one possibility for such a situation. These ferocious beasts were controlled by someone and formed into this array. Then their flesh and blood were sucked dry. What about his senior martial brothers and junior martial nephews? If they used the same array to attack the blood-sucking monster, would they be sucked dry as well? Ji Xinyu felt as if her entire body had fallen into an ice cave. She felt a chill from head to toe. If that was the case, what kind of role did her master, Ziyun, play? She didn't even dare to think about it. Her master, he was most likely a member of the demon sect and Xieju's subordinate. That formation was not a demon-subduing formation. It was very likely that it was a formation that helped Demon Master Xieju become a true demon. They were just throwing their lives away. What should she do? Chapter 3042. Xieju did not follow them all the way to Rongyuishenlin's carefree island. This was because the two people who had been flying in front of him stopped midway and went directly to a restaurant in the city below to eat and drink. This made Xieju very irritable. He wished he could kick the two of them up and continue on his way. The sky was already dark, but the two of them still had no intention of getting up. Especially that Yunxi. When Xieju usually saw her eating, he felt that she was elegant and quiet, a role model. But now, when he saw her eating, he felt that she was deliberately showing off and was not heroic at all. Most importantly, he felt that she ate too slowly. In his anxiety, Xieju wanted to set the restaurant on fire and use extreme methods to bombard the two of them. However, before he could release the fire, Huang Qinglu, who had been following him, suddenly walked over and told him a piece of good news. Ji Xinyue had returned to the Purple Cloud sect. This news excited Xieju more than any other news. He still didn't believe it. He opened the sound transmission talisman and contacted the other side. Finally, he confirmed the authenticity of the news. Ji Xinyue had indeed returned. He naturally no longer had the heart to follow Rongyuishenlin. With a sneer, he immediately rode a cloud away. He originally wanted to use the instant speed technique, but Huang Luqing told him that he still had a tough battle to fight tomorrow. He could not waste his mind power for no reason, so he needed to use an ordinary flight technique to fly back. However, Xieju was eager to return. In the end, Huang Luqing thought of a compromise. The mermaid race also had a kind of teleportation technique. Although it could not compare to the immortal race's instant speed technique, It was still much faster than ordinary flight techniques. It could take him 4 hours to reach his destination. Xiejuk agreed. When he and Huang Luqing arrived at the Purple Cloud sect, it was already the middle of the night. With their martial arts and familiarity with the terrain, it was very easy for them to sneak into the Purple Cloud sect silently. As soon as he returned, he did not bother to exchange pleasantries with the people here and went straight to Ji Xinyue's courtyard. He had to see her with his own eyes before he could truly feel at ease. At the door, Sect Master Ziyun stopped him. This was the second time the master and disciple had met after Xiejuk returned to his true form. Sect Master Ziyun looked at him with a slightly complicated gaze. Then he lowered his eyes and said his only condition, "Young master, Shenyu does not know anything. I have already made her unconscious. She will only wake up in 2 days. By then, everything will have been settled. I just need to tidy things up properly. She will not discover anything. Young master, you cannot harm her." Xiejuk glanced at him and said indifferently, "I have my reasons. Don't worry." He turned around and entered the house. Sect Master Ziyun's eyes dimmed. The Devil Lord had awakened, but his mischievous little disciple had disappeared. Was this what he wanted? He was still worried. Just as he was about to follow in to take a look, he saw Xiejuk rush out with a livid expression. "She's not in the house at all." Sect Master Ziyun's expression changed drastically. "Impossible. I saw her outside the window just now." As he spoke, he also rushed into the house. Ji Xinyu's boudoir was warm, just like when he carried her in, but she was nowhere to be seen. Instead, there was a new doll on her bed, quietly lying on her bed. Xiejuk followed him in. A spell was used on this doll. If you don't look carefully, you'll think that she's lying in the blanket. I just lifted the bed curtain and found that something was wrong. Had she been kidnapped? Or did she escape? Logically speaking, the drug he used on her should not have failed. There was almost no possibility of her escaping. Chapter 3043. Huang Luqing silently walked around the room and came to a conclusion. She left on her own. No one took her away. No one doubted Huang Luqing's deduction because he was Sharkman and could follow a person's aura to find them. He was also the military advisor of the devil race. What he deduced was not false. She left on her own? Then there was only one possibility. She had found some clues and went out to investigate. Huang Luqing took a deep breath and said, "Young master, I'm afraid the situation has changed. If Ji Xinyue tells anyone about young master, I'm afraid the array won't be able to be opened smoothly tomorrow. The only thing we can do now is to open the array in advance and let young master recover in case of any accidents." Sect Master Ziyun frowned slightly. It was not easy to open this array. Even if all the people were in place, it would take 4 hours to open it. It was not something that could be opened immediately. When he mentioned the difficulty, Huang Luqing also frowned. Others are easy to deal with, but that Rongyue Tianlan is not easy to deal with. If Ji Xinyue tells him what she heard here, I'm afraid he will come immediately. If he comes to mess things up, our plan will fail. Xiejuk clenched his fingers slightly. He did not doubt this. That Rongyue Tianlan was not an ordinary person. Sect Master Ziyun said, "Don't worry about this. I have the voice transmission talisman that Xinyu used to contact him. Before you arrived, Rongyue Tianlan had already tried to contact her. I pretended to be her and answered it, calming him down. Rongyue Tianlan will not suspect anything. He will not come for a while." He paused again. From his tone, he will come here to look for her the day after tomorrow, so he will not ruin our plan. Huang Luqing heaved a sigh of relief and urged Xiejuk, "Young master, why don't we ask Ziyun to call everyone to set up the array now?" Xiejuk's face was as cold as iron. "No need, find her first." "Young master, I have made up my mind. There is no need to say anything more. Besides, isn't this array the most effective when it is opened at noon? Then we should still act according to the original plan. Tomorrow morning, we will gather and set up the array at noon. Huang Luqing, follow her aura and search." It was late at night, and third senior martial brother was sitting on the big green rock, watching over the demon-revealing mirror not far away. Suddenly, A figure flashed and eldest senior martial brother Feng Wuji walked over. He spoke straightforwardly, "Third brother, you still have to fight tomorrow, so I'll keep watch for the rest of the night. You should quickly go back and rest. Eldest senior brother is so considerate." Third senior brother and his disciples had a look of gratitude in their eyes. Since they were brothers, there was no need to be too courteous. Therefore, third senior brother and his disciples quickly left. The entrance of the Beast Valley returned to its peaceful state. After the group of people had left, Feng Wuji walked up to the demon-revealing mirror and slowly took it off and kept it in his storage space. At the same time, Xie Zhuk and Huang Luqing appeared at the entrance of the valley. She entered the valley. Huang Liuqing's tone was incomparably certain. Xie Zhuk paused for a moment and did not say anything. With a flash, he entered the valley. Within the Beast Valley, Ji Xinyue stood in the middle of the array. Yu Xinjian saw that her face was extremely pale and that she was standing there like a wooden person in a daze. He was a little puzzled. He touched her fingers and found that her fingers were as cold as ice. He was shocked. "What's wrong with you?" Ji Xinyue trembled as if she had been struck by lightning and jumped up. "No." Chapter 3044. Ji Xinyu trembled as if she had been struck by lightning and jumped up. "No." Yu Shin Sword. Ji Xinyu ignored Yu Shin Sword's confusion and took out a sound transmission talisman with trembling hands. This sound transmission talisman was connected to her third senior brother. She subconsciously wanted to open it, but her fingers paused. What role did these senior martial brothers of hers play in this earth-shattering conspiracy? What if they all knew and only hid it from her? No, third senior brother will also go to battle tomorrow. This matter concerns his life and death. He can't be involved. He should be a pawn that will be sacrificed. She steeled herself and opened the sound transmission talisman. The other side quickly picked up, "Little junior sister? Why aren't you asleep yet?" His tone was naturally filled with joy and concern. Ji Xinyu didn't know why, but her heart ached. "Little junior sister, why are you looking for me at this time?" Her short silence made third senior brother a little worried. Ji Xinyu didn't know where to start, so she first asked, "Third senior brother, where are you?" "I just returned to my room and was about to rest." "Little junior sister, do you need something?" "If there's something, I'll come to your courtyard to find you." "Ah, I heard you were on duty at the entrance of the valley? Did you change shifts?" Ji Xinyu originally wanted to say it through the sound transmission talisman, but she felt that it wasn't convenient to say such a big thing through the sound transmission talisman. She might as well call third senior brother to another place to have a good chat. "Yes, there's a big battle tomorrow. Eldest senior brother was afraid that I would be too tired and not be able to rest well, so he replaced me just now. Now that he's guarding the entrance of the valley, nothing will go wrong." Ji Xinyu's heart sank. She felt that there was something wrong with eldest senior brother, but she didn't dare to be sure. Taking another breath, she decided to go straight to the point. "Third senior brother, there's something wrong with the array tomorrow?" Just as she said this, a light suddenly flashed and the sound transmission talisman in Ji Xinyu's palm flew out like lightning and closed. She was shocked and quickly raised her head to see a black-robed person standing not far from her. The black robe was like the night, his hair like a curtain, satin down to his ankles. He wore a hood on his head, hiding his face in the shadow of the hood, making people couldn't see his face, but they felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. Huang Qinglu was also standing not far behind him. Her eyes seemed to contain an unfathomable smile as she looked at her and slowly said, "What's wrong with that array formation?" Ji Xinyu abruptly took a step back, then another step back, looking at Huang Qinglu, then at the black-robed man, her palms sweating. Her gaze turned to the black-robed man. "Little Jiao?" The black-robed man slowly raised his head. His long hair parted like satin, revealing his slightly pale face and a pair of eyes that were as deep as the night. "Senior sister." His voice was slightly cold and had the magnetism of a cello. Ji Xinyu froze. This face was completely different from Xie Fengliu's. Xie Fenglu was naturally tall and handsome, but he had a likable baby face, which made him more adorable. On the other hand, The black-robed man's facial features were extremely deep and well-defined. He was extraordinarily handsome, especially his eyes. The corners of his eyes were slightly raised, and his eyes were as black as an abyss, as if they wanted to pull people in. At this moment, those eyes were looking at her. His eyelashes that were as dense as fans gently fluttered, giving off a hint of charm and enchantment. "Senior sister, don't you recognize me?" Ji Xinyu's fingers gripped the hilt of the moon god sword, looking at those eyes. "You're not little Gio." Her little Gio wasn't so charming and bewitching. His body also didn't have such a cold aura. Chapter 3045. The black-robed man sighed softly and slowly took a step forward. Ji Xinyu subconsciously retreated. She had already felt the powerful demonic aura of this black-robed man. This person's cultivation was extremely profound. With her martial arts, she would probably be defeated within a few dozen moves. Furthermore, there was Huang Qinglu, whose strength was unknown, standing beside him. The probability of her defeating the two of them was 0. It seemed that she could only escape. While Ji Xinyu was dealing with them, she had already begun to carefully plan an escape plan. The black-robed man was tall and had been looking down at her pretty face. He slowly said, "If I'm not little Nine, then who am I?" Ji Xinyu's mind was spinning rapidly as she replied, "I don't care who you are." The moon god sword in her hand seemed to struggle uncontrollably and even swiped a screen in her mind. However, Ji Xinyu's attention was focused on the two people in front of her. She did not notice the moon god sword's small movements at all. After she finished speaking, she suddenly flicked her fingertips and a cloud of smoke suddenly spread out from her body, covering her figure. This smoke talisman was given to her by Rongyue Erenlun, who said that it was best to use it when escaping. At that time, she was somewhat disdainful because she never ran when fighting with others. She always wanted to fight to the end. However, she could not continue fighting now. She had to quickly escape and inform the people in Ziyun sect. While the smoke dispersed, she wanted to use her martial arts to escape. She took the opportunity to jump back, but unexpectedly, her waist suddenly went numb and her entire body froze. There was someone behind her, and they took advantage of the situation to plot against her. Her body slowly fell into someone's arms. At the moment when she was about to faint, she saw her master's face. When Ji Xinyu woke up again, she found herself in a rather exquisitely decorated room. There were famous landscape paintings hanging on the wall, and the furniture in the room was made of precious agarwood. Below her was a milky white ivory bed, and her body was covered with a cloud silk quilt. Everywhere was a low-key luxury. Ji Xinyu was not unfamiliar with this room. She had been here a few times before. This was Xie Fengliu's room. However, most of the furniture inside had been changed. If it were not for the painting on the wall, Ji Xinyu would not have recognized it. That painting was something she had given to Xie Fenglu back then. Because this brat liked to pretend to be cultured back then, Ji Xinyu happened to find this painting, so she gave it to him to make him look good. However, Ji Xinyue did not have the time to look at the changes in the room. The moment she opened her eyes, her gaze focused on Xie Juk, who was sitting at the table not far away. Her fingers clenched under the blanket. There was a clam shell on the table. Inside the clam shell, a moonlight pearl was shining faintly, illuminating the furnishings in the room. It also made Xie Juk's black hair and black clothes shine like satin, but his hands were as fair as jade. He was concocting kung fu tea, and his movements were as smooth as flowing water. He seemed to have noticed that Ji Xinyu had woken up and turned to look at her, his voice gentle. "Xinyu, do you want some tea?" Ji Xinyu slowly sat up on the bed. Her acupuncture points were sealed, so even though she could move, she could only sit up normally. The successive shocks of the truth made her, who had always been calm, pale. She stared at Xie Juk and ignored the tea he handed over. She asked straightforwardly, "What do you want?" Xie Juk was still holding the tea in front of her. He looked at her with a faint smile. "Senior sister, you don't even want to drink the tea I brewed." Chapter 3046. When he smiled, he looked a little like Xie Fenglu from back then. It was as if he was still little Xie Jiu, the little Xiejio who often made her laugh and wanted to shelter her from the wind and rain even though he didn't have thick wings. Ji Xinyue liked to drink tea, and little Xiejio was good at making tea, even better than the tea masters in the palace. In the past, every time they met, Xie Fenglu would always make tea for her. Ji Xinyue liked his filial piety. Once, Ji Xinyue sighed while drinking his tea. "Little Jio, I'm used to drinking this. You'll make my appetite picky. What if I can't drink it in the future? It's best if you become picky. Senior sister, how about you let little Jio make tea for you for the rest of your life?" Xie Fenglio's eyes sparkled at that time. He was half joking and half serious. The past could not be traced back. A month ago, there was no gap between the siblings, but now, she waved her hand and knocked over his tea. "You're not little Xiejio." This person did not look or speak like Xie Fenglu. How could her junior brother become him? The teacup fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Xiejuk lowered his eyes and looked at the broken teacup. A moment later, he smiled and waved his sleeve. The fragments on the ground disappeared, and even the spilled tea disappeared. He sat down by the bed. Ji Xinyue quietly shrank back, trying to stay as far away from him as possible. Xiejuk didn't seem to see her actions. He looked at her with a smile and said indifferently, "I'm indeed not little Xiejio. He's just a wisp of my main soul. Now that I've revived, he'll naturally return to me. But don't worry, although our temperaments and appearances are different, our preferences are the same. He likes you, I like you too. No matter what, I won't harm you." His long and narrow eyes narrowed like a fox's. Ji Xinyue's heart sank. She had thought of all kinds of possibilities. For example, he was still Xie Fenglu, but his temperament had changed greatly after he became a demon. For example, Xie Fenglu had been refined by this demon and became its nourishment. But she didn't expect Xie Fenglu to be just a wisp of Xiejuk's soul. No wonder their appearances and temperaments were different. If a soul reincarnated on its own, then this soul had to be extremely powerful. Only then could it directly transform into the main soul during the process of reincarnation and replenish the other souls on its own. Only then could it reincarnate into a complete person. Now that Xiejuk had revived and all his souls had returned, little Jio had completely disappeared and would never return. Ji Xinyu felt a sharp pain in her heart. She clenched her fists so tightly that they turned pale. She pursed her lips and stared at him. "The little fox in the crystal cave was you." Xiejuk paused for a moment, then smiled. "Xinyu is really smart. That is indeed my true body." Ji Xinyu clenched her fists again and asked all the questions in her heart. "Didn't your soul already scatter? How could he have left his true body behind? Who locked you in there?" Xiejuk turned his head to look at her. "It seems like you know a lot. Back then, I fell for the tricks of the immortal realm, and my soul was destroyed by 81 bolts of golden lightning. It was Huang Luqing who used a secret technique and spent hundreds of years to gather a small portion of my soul and condense my true body again. But in the end, my soul was shattered and incomplete. So at that time, I was no different from an ordinary fox and could easily die. And the crystal cave in this beast valley is a place where natural spiritual energy condenses. It's the most suitable place for me to recuperate, so Huang Luqing locked my chaotic true body there." Chapter 3047. So that's how it is. That meteorite chain is an immortal treasure. Isn't Huang Luqing a demon? How could he have such a treasure? Shenyue, Sharkman is not divided into immortals and demons. He can become an immortal or a demon with a single thought, and the meteorite chain is not divided into good and evil. It is a divine item, but it is not an immortal artifact. Ji Shenyue was speechless. So her master had lied to her back then. She gritted her teeth. "Then what about my master?" Xiejuk leaned against the bedpost and sighed softly. "He is the left protector of the demon sect. But he clearly cultivates the immortal Tao. I know that demons have spells to hide their auras and can blend into the human world without being discovered. However, that can only fool people with lower cultivation in the immortal world. Those who have cultivated to the level of a divine lord or above can see through it. And the people he has befriended all these years are experts from the immortal world. How could he not reveal any flaws? This was also what Ji Xinyue could not figure out the most after knowing her master's identity. Her master was clearly not a demon. He also taught his disciples immortal techniques. But why was he a demon? And the highest protector of the demon sect? If she had not seen it with her own eyes, Ji Xinyue would not have believed it even if she was beaten to death. After discovering that her master was a demon's subordinate, heavenly lightning was not enough to describe Ji Xinyue's state at that time. No matter how calm and collected she was still a little stunned when she encountered such an earth-shattering matter. If she had not been so distraught at that time, she would not have been so easily schemed against and brought here. Xie Juk poured a cup of tea and handed it to her. Are you very puzzled? Then drink this cup of tea first, and I will tell you the reason. Ji Xinyue looked down at the tea in her hand and sneered. She casually threw it. You don't have to say it. The teacup flew out, but this time, before it landed on the ground, Xie Juk rolled up his sleeve and pulled it back. In the blink of an eye, it landed in his hand, and not a single drop of tea spilled out. Xie Juk looked at her with a faint smile. Are you afraid that I will do something to this tea and drug you? Ji Xinyue closed her eyes and did not reply. Xie Juk took a sip of the teacup. If it's poisonous, poison me to death first. He finished the cup of tea in a few gulps, then showed the bottom of the cup to Ji Xinyue. Are you relieved now? Ji Xinyue's voice was cold as she said frankly, I'm worried. If you did something to the tea, you can take the antidote in advance. You'll be fine after drinking it, and it might even be beneficial to your health. I can't drink it. I don't know what kind of trap I'll fall into. So, you don't have to waste any effort on the tea. Xie Juk? He looked at her with a complicated gaze for a long time and sighed, You really are? Forget it. I've known you for so many years, and I know you've always been suspicious, so I don't blame you. Ji Xinyue's voice was cold. You're wrong. You and I are strangers. Xie Fenglu has been with me for so many years, but he is already dead. When she said the last few words, her heart twisted. Xie Juk turned the cup in his hand, as if he was not surprised by Ji Xinyue's words. He only smiled and said, Although Xie Fenglu is a part of my soul, he is my main soul. I have all his memories, and I remember every detail of your interactions with him clearly. Even the person he loves is the one I like. Then, what's the difference between me and him? Why do you have to be so calculative? Chapter 3048. Xie Juk was a proud person and had a bad temper. He never bothered to explain anything to others and would send them flying without a word. No matter how much he doted on his former concubines, once they offended him, they would still be cold-blooded and punished by him. Some of them would even be smashed into pieces and reincarnated. However, he had been explaining to her in a good mood. He was not even angry when she threw his cup twice. Even he did not expect himself to be so patient. Even he felt that it was strange. Perhaps it was because his soul liked her too much, to the point of not caring about gains and losses. Ji Xinyue ignored him. So what if he was the main soul? After all, he was not Xie Fenglu. She could not lump them together. Xinyue, I can sense his thoughts. He did want to save you that day, which was why he agreed to Huang Liuqing's conditions. Originally, when the main soul returned to its original position, even if the main body had some memories of the main soul, it would not have the main soul's feelings. However, perhaps his obsession with you was too strong. I felt everything he felt. I couldn't even bear to absorb all the beasts in Beast Valley, but you also absorbed most of them. Xie Juk sighed. There was no other way. If I didn't absorb them, I wouldn't have been able to recover. If I couldn't recover, I wouldn't have been able to go to Tianjing Sea to save you. The first thing I did when I recovered that day was to rush back to find you. Unfortunately, you were no longer there. Unfortunately? Ji Xinyue asked in return. So you were still hoping that I would be trapped in that ice shell? Xie Juk heard her unfriendly tone and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. That's not the case. That day Huang Liuqing imprisoned you there. As long as you could break it within 10 days, she would not take your life. That was why Xie Fenglu agreed to Huang Liuqing's conditions to save you. This was his obsession before he died. This obsession was so strong that even I felt it. Ji Xinyue's heart ached again. She believed this. She believed that Xie Fenglu would not harm her that day. It turned out that Xie Fenglu had sacrificed himself to become Xie Juk for her. The image of the baby-faced Xie Fenglu flashed across her mind. She remembered the pale face he had when he had plotted against her in the sea. Even though he had been controlled, the shock, anger, and panic in his eyes had not been faked. Ji Xinyu felt as if her heart had been stabbed by a knife, slowly twisting and turning in pain. However, her heart that had sunk to the bottom of the ice when she discovered the truth was now slightly warm. Little Nine didn't actually betray her. Little Nine had always been that Little Nine and would not change even in death. She took a deep breath and glanced at Xie Juk in front of her. If he killed Xie Juk and tore apart his soul, would he be able to revive Xie Fenglu? Perhaps because her gaze was too unfriendly, Xie Juk propped his chin up and looked at her. Actually, I'm also a little puzzled. What are you wondering about? Why didn't you scream? Xie Juk slowly said, You're awake now. Since you already know the truth and can communicate with me normally, why don't you shout and tell me all about my schemes? I thought the first thing you would do when you woke up would be to scream. Ji Xinyue sneered. Since you're prepared, you must have covered your courtyard with some kind of barrier. I'm afraid that no one outside will hear anything even if I shout until my throat is hoarse. Why should I waste my energy? Xie Juk, he could not help but sigh. Although it's easy to deal with smart people, it's also less fun. Chapter 3049. He couldn't help but sigh. Although it's easy to deal with smart people, it's also less fun. Actually, I've always been looking forward to the moment you wake up and scream. Then, you realize that you can't call for anyone. Pervert! Xie Juk held her hand, his eyes flashing. That's perverted? Actually, I can do even more perverted things. He exerted force on his wrist and pulled her into his embrace. He lowered his head and kissed her. Ji Xinyue had lost all her strength, so she was naturally no match for him. However, just because she couldn't use her psychokinesis didn't mean that her movements would be slow. Her palm reached out in time. Xie Juk's passionate kiss landed on her palm. His eyes darkened, and he tightened his grip on her other hand. He was quite strong, and Ji Xinyue's wrist was almost broken by him. Her face turned pale. However, she was smiling. Xie Juk, I know I'm no match for you now, and I can't stop you from doing anything. However, my life is my own. I'll use it to bet with you. She was clearly in so much pain that her forehead was covered in sweat, but her words were sonorous and powerful. The light in Xie Juk's eyes changed several times. His fingers loosened slightly, but he refused to let go. Are you threatening me with your life? Xie Fenglu might fall for this trick of yours, but I won't. Besides, with my magic power, even if you die, I can still bring you back to life. Even if I can't, it's not a bad thing to imprison your soul by my side. At that time, you might be able to watch me slaughter everyone in the Sanskrit continent and make your father and mother tremble and beg for mercy at my feet. He said a bunch of ruthless words. Ji Xinyue was unmoved. She only said a few words. Why don't you try? Xie Juk was speechless. The atmosphere in the room was extremely quiet. Even the air seemed to be so heavy that it was about to drip water. Xie Juk stared at her. As the Devil Master, his aura was fully released, causing the temperature in the room to drop. There was a tank of fish in his room. Under the pressure of his aura, the fish in the tank trembled and stuck to the walls of the tank. A moment later, their bellies flipped over. Ji Xinyue was in his arms, so she naturally felt the invisible aura from his body. Her psychokinesis was sealed, and her heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it was going to jump out of her chest. However, she remained fearless and held her head high. She did not lose to him in terms of aura. After a while, just as Ji Xinyue felt that her heart was about to burst, Xie Juk finally let go of her hand. You are the most stubborn woman I have ever seen. Ji Xinyue took a step back and leaned against the wall. She closed her eyes and stopped talking. Siejuk's gaze landed on her wrist, and his pupils constricted. Because of his strong grip, there was already a bruise there. It was a shocking sight. He suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist again. Ji Xinyu suddenly opened her eyes and looked at him warily. He coughed and said, "I'll apply some ointment for you." He took out a small bottle and was about to apply the ointment on her wrist. Ji Xinyu retracted her hand and said indifferently, "I'll do it myself." She did not use Siejuk's ointment, but took out her own from her storage space. The sparkling blue bottle looked exquisite and pleasing to the eye. Rongyue Tanlan had forced it on her. He had said that she was too easy to get injured, so he had forced more than 10 bottles of secret ointment for her to use in emergencies. Now it had come in handy. When Siejuk saw the small bottle, his handsome face darkened. Chapter 30-50. He recognized that it was Rongyue Tianlan's medicine. He found it particularly glaring. Pa! The medicine in Ji Xinyue's hand fell to the ground and shattered. The liquid inside spilled all over the ground. Ji Xinyue raised her head and glared at him. Siejuk also looked down at her like a provocative child. "What about me? If you want to apply medicine, you can only apply mine. My medicine is no worse than his." Ji Xinyue felt that this person was simply unreasonable. She simply closed her eyes and ignored him. Thoughts of escaping were racing through her mind, but she couldn't think of anything for a moment. She had encountered countless dangerous situations in her life, but she had always managed to avert them. Only this time, she felt a little hopeless. Her wrist was suddenly snatched away. She struggled but couldn't break free. She opened her eyes to take a look. Siejuk was sitting on the side of her bed. He held her hand with one hand and applied his ointment with the other. The originally burning wound felt cool, and the pain lessened a lot. The pearl-like moonlight reflected off half of Siejuk's face, making it look as delicate as jade porcelain. His curly and thick eyelashes formed a half-moon silhouette. His skin color was still a little light, especially when set off by his black hair. His face was as white as snow. The shape of his lips was very beautiful. When he pursed them slightly, 2 shallow dimples appeared on his cheeks. Ji Xinyue originally wanted to pull her hand back, but when she saw the dimples on his cheeks, her heart skipped a beat. Xie Xiaojiu also had dimples on his face, and the shape of the dimples was exactly the same as Siejuk's. Usually, when this kid had a smiling face and asked her for a favor, it was easy for his 2 dimples to appear. He looked exceptionally likable. "How did your main soul escape and become Xie Xiaojiu?" Ji Xinyue blurted out. Siejuk raised his head and glanced at her. "Probably because of you." Ji Xinyue. "What did it have to do with her?" Siejuk replied as he applied the ointment for her. "Back then, you talked with my original body for so long and told me a lot of things about the outside world. At that time, my soul hadn't completely gathered, so my soul was very unstable. Accidentally, the main soul escaped while I was unconscious. It gathered the other souls and reincarnated as Xie Fengli. After all, he had my aura. When his mother gave birth to him, she dreamed of dark clouds above her head. Mortals didn't know that it was my dark aura. They thought that he was a child full of bad luck, so they abandoned him not long after he was born, leaving him an orphan. Xie Fenglu had no memory of what happened before he was abandoned. He remembered that he was an abandoned child and was raised by an old beggar. It seemed that after the return of the main soul, his memories had become clearer. He had even recovered the memories of when he was just born. Xinyu, this shows that we are still fated. Xie Fenglu was born because of you and died because of you. Furthermore, he was able to meet you after he became an abandoned child and was brought to the Purple Cloud sect by you. You two should be a match made in heaven. What is Rongyue Tanlan? He's not worthy of you at all. Also, he's not sincere to you. He only uses you as a substitute for his former wife." After Siejuk finished applying the ointment, he lowered his head and blew on it. His breath was cold as it blew on her wrist. She felt the hair on her wrist tremble. She automatically ignored Siejuk's first few words, but his last sentence made her heart sink. Chapter 30-51. Former wife? He once had a wife. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. Is that so? Her tone was indifferent, and it was obvious that she did not believe him. She did not believe this. Rongyue Tianlan had clearly been engaged to her when he was more than 1,000 years old. It was impossible for him to marry before breaking off the engagement with her. Rongyue Tianlan was not that kind of person. If he really had a sweetheart and wanted to marry her, the first thing he would do would be to break off the engagement with her. After that, he would go back and marry that woman. That's right, he had indeed come back to break off the engagement, but didn't he pursue her again? Therefore, even if he had a sweetheart, she should not exist. Otherwise, he would have run back to find his sweetheart after breaking off the engagement with her and would not have pestered her. At most, he did have a sweetheart, but that sweetheart had already passed away. You don't believe me? Xie Zhuk raised his eyebrows and looked at her. What happened between him and me has nothing to do with you. Ji Xinyue directly drew the line. Xie Zhuk laughed and leaned back against the side of the bed like her. The two of them lay side by side on the bed. Ji Xinyue frowned and moved in. Xie Zhuk suddenly held one of her hands. Do you still remember the mirage we saw in the Tianjing Ocean? Do you still remember that woman in white? Ji Xinyue's heart tightened slightly. She remained calm. So what if I remember? Xie Zhuk looked at her and smiled. There was a hint of evil in his smile. That woman was his confidant. Her name was Yunqi. He met her in the Tianxi continent and has been by his side for nearly 3,000 years. He doted on her very much and did many things for her. No matter what she liked, he would always think of ways to do it for her. The scene in the mirage flashed through Ji Xinyue's mind. She took a light breath and said indifferently, "Don't tell me you're saying that Yunqi is Rongyue Tianlan's sweetheart?" If his sweetheart was Yunqi, then since they had been together for more than 3,000 years, why did Rongyue Tianlan only think of breaking off the engagement now? Shouldn't he have taken Yunqi far away after breaking off the engagement? Then why did he come back and pester Ji Xinyue? Had his head been squeezed by the door? Therefore, this was not true. Rongyue Tianlan and Yunqi were probably just friends. It was only right for friends to help each other. Just like herself, didn't she have a few Jianghu friends around her? She was willing to do anything for them. Ji Xinyu originally wanted to refute him in her heart, but she accidentally said what she meant. Xie Zhuk chuckled. There's a reason for this. Yunqi was indeed his sweetheart. The two of them had been inseparable since they were on the Tianxi continent. However, Rongyue Tianlan encountered a problem during his closed-door training many years ago, and a part of his soul escaped. That soul was reincarnated on another continent, and there, he fell in love with a princess named Jiyu. The two of them seemed to have some twists and turns, and Princess Jiyu married him. He glanced at Ji Xinyue and continued, later on, probably because of Rongyue Tianlan, that princess passed away with hatred. Rongyue Tianlan's soul also died of depression not long after and returned to his body, allowing him to have the memories of that soul. He felt deeply sorry for Jiyu. He didn't know how he had found out that Jiyu had reincarnated in the Fanning continent, so he had made an agreement with Yunqi that he would return to the Fanning continent to break off the engagement and search for Jiyu's whereabouts. He wanted to make it up to her. Then he found you in Tianyue. Chapter 3052. He can't be sure which one of you is his former wife, so he has an ambiguous relationship with both of you, holding this and that. Xie Zhuk was very talented and proficient in psychological tactics. His words were half true and half false, but they also seemed to be wrong. Ji Xinyue clenched her fists slightly. She recalled the series of events that Rongyue Tianlan had treated Tianyu and her. It was indeed like he was trying to determine something between the two sisters, and he had initially decided on Tianyu. For some reason, Ji Xinyue felt an inexplicable heartache when she said this name, and she even subconsciously tried to avoid it. However, her appearance was different from Tianyu's. How did he determine that? Under such circumstances, Ji Xinyue did not want to think about this relationship problem. Now was not the time to care about these feelings. Therefore, she forced herself to pull her thoughts out of those messy guesses. She knew why Xie Zhuk was saying all this. She smiled coldly and said indifferently, "Your story is very well made up. Whether it's true or false, I don't care. He came to the Sanskrit continent to find his wife's reincarnation, which proves that he is still very affectionate and a lover. I like it. Siejuk did not expect her to be so obsessed. He looked at her. Lover? If he was a lover, he wouldn't have such deep feelings for Yunshi. He's only looking for his wife's reincarnation to make it up to her. He doesn't really want to love her anymore. He and Yunshi had an agreement. Yunshi's bird is a soul-searching bird, and it can find people based on their souls. Yunshi risked her life to help him go to another continent to detect Jiyu's aura. Then, she transmigrated here to test you and Tianyu. He had already tested Tianyu, and Tianyu was not. You didn't see how relaxed he was at that time. Then he brought Yunshi to find you and test your... Ji Xinyue closed her eyes. You're really good at making up stories. Continue. This story was indeed quite touching, but how could Siejuk know so much? It was obvious that he was making it up. Siejuk knew what she was thinking when he saw her expression. He clenched his fists and suddenly sneered. You don't believe me? All right, looks like you won't shed tears until you see the coffin. I'll let you see for yourself. He turned around and jumped off the bed. He sat on the chair and drew some charms in the air with his 2 fingers. Suddenly, he pointed his finger in the air and a ripple-like wall slowly appeared in the room. The wall shook a few times and an image gradually appeared. It was the scene that Siejuk had seen when he was following Rong Yuetian. There were even sounds. However, perhaps because Siejuk's cultivation was not up to par, the sounds and images were intermittent and blurry. However, he could still guess the latter sentence based on the first sentence. Of course, Siejuk had made some changes to the image. For example, in the image, Rongyue Tianlan promised Yunshi that if the test revealed that Ji Xinyue was his former wife, he would marry her and continue their relationship. However, he wouldn't let Yunshi down. After marrying Ji Xinyue, he would marry Yunshi. It would be enough if he only married the 2 of them in his lifetime. 1 husband and 2 wives, free and unfettered. Yunshi, who was still a little worried, sighed faintly. What if that Princess Xinyu isn't Jiyu? Are you still going to find Jiyu? Chapter 3053. Rongyue Tianlan shook his head. If she isn't, then it proves that Jiyu and I are not fated to be together. I won't look for her again. If I meet her again in the future, I will compensate her with something else. Then, what about Xinyu? What do you plan to do then? Yunshi asked. Rongyue Tianlan bitterly smiled and shook his head. Since she isn't Jiyu, I have no reason to marry her. Of course, my previous actions may have caused her to have other thoughts. I will compensate her with other favors. He held Yunshi's hand again. Yunshi, you and I have been together for more than 3,000 years. I like you the most. At that time, I will return to the heavenly bestowal continent with you and never come back. The scene continued to play, sometimes clear and sometimes blurry. She saw Rongyue Tianlan riding a cloud with Yunshi in the air. They first met Ji Tianyue. After confirming that Ji Tianyue wasn't Jiyu, the 2 of them rode a cloud again, heading in the direction of Carefree Island. Finally, the scene of Rongyue Tianlan and Yunshi descending from the cloud and running to a restaurant to eat appeared on the screen. Yunshi ate slowly, and Rongyue Tianlan drank a few cups to accompany her. A handsome man and a beautiful woman sat facing each other. Countless people were envious to death. The scene even showed the envious whispers of other customers in the restaurant. They said things like, a match made in heaven, a jade couple, and so on. Yunshi and Rongyue Tianlan obviously heard it. Yunshi's cheeks turned slightly red, and Rongyue Tianlan looked at her and smiled. Everything was understood without words. Crash! The water wall that was playing the scene suddenly collapsed. The scene disappeared, and water flowed all over the room. This spell seemed to consume a lot of willpower. After the water wall collapsed, Siejuk's sitting body swayed. Not only was his face pale, but even his lips were white. Xinyu, you don't believe me after seeing this. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. How could you see these scenes? Besides, Tianyue has always been in the cold palace of Nantian Palace. Why would she run to that small city for no reason? She was also bullied by a few wretched men. This scene is also your doing. Siejuk, his eyes narrowed dangerously. You still don't believe me? All right, I'll tell you everything. I couldn't find you in the crystal sky ocean. Through restoring some images, I found out that it was Rongyue Tianlan who saved you, but I couldn't find out where he hid you, so I could only use a trick to lure him out. Rongyue Tianlan had given Ji Tianyue a special sound-transmitting talisman and promised her that she would save her no matter what, so I got Ji Tianyue out. He steeled his heart and told her everything about how he and Huang Luqing had brought Ji Tianyue to the ice crevice. This time he didn't lie at all, nor did he make up any lies. Ji Xinyu sat under the blanket. Her face was a little pale, and her eyes were lowered. No one knew what she was thinking. The room fell into silence again. A moment later, she raised her head and looked straight at Siejuk. Where's Tianyu? In the end, what happened to her? Siejuk froze. He did not expect her to be concerned about this under such circumstances. He paused for a moment. She's dead. A voice suddenly came from outside the door. Following that, Huang Luqing pushed open the door and walked in. Siejuk frowned, and his voice turned cold. Huang Luqing, who let you in? Huang Luqing bowed to him and said indifferently, Young master, she will find out about this sooner or later. Why don't you tell her now? Chapter 3054. He looked at the water stains on the ground and raised his hand to draw an incantation. His technique was actually similar to Siejuk's earlier technique. The water stains on the ground instantly formed a water mirror in the air. In the water mirror, what happened after Rongyue Tianlan and the others left Ji Tianyue behind appeared. This time, the scene was exceptionally clear, and even the conversation inside could be clearly heard. Ji Shenyue watched as Ji Tianyue cried and threw a tantrum after Rongyue Tianlan left, to the appearance of Siejuk and the others, and finally died tragically under Siejuk's palm. Ji Shenyue's face turned completely pale this time. The scene that Huang Luqing had created was obviously omitted by Siejuk. Moreover, the scene in the scene, as well as the reactions of Ji Tianyue and the others, was very realistic. There should not be any exaggeration. Moreover, the overlap with the scenes that Siejuk had created was extremely high. Even the clothes and expressions of the characters inside were exactly the same. If the scenes created by the two of them were fake, it was impossible for the overlap to be so high. Furthermore, when Siejuk had created that scene, Huang Luqing had not come in yet. She had not seen it at all. Ji Xinyu had a photographic memory. She deliberately compared the small branches and leaves in the two videos, in her mind. For example, the degree of distortion of the trunk of the tree behind Ji Tianyu, the thickness of the branches and the distribution of the tree branches. Other things could be imitated, but if these special details were not real, it was impossible for the big tree in the two videos to be exactly the same. If these were real, then the other scenes that Siejuk had played were probably real too. Shenyue, do you believe me now? Siejuk looked at her with bright eyes. Ji Shenyue slowly raised her head. There seemed to be flames dancing in her beautiful eyes. I don't believe you. She stretched out her hand toward Siejuk. Where's my voice transmission talisman? Give it back to me. I want to contact Tianyue. As soon as she woke up, she realized that all the voice transmission talismans on her body had disappeared. It was obvious that Siejuk had taken them away. She only had the blood-red voice transmission talisman left on her body. She did not know why it had been left behind, but it was useless. Siejuk frowned. To prevent her from leaking the secret, Sect Master Ziyun had already taken away all the voice transmission talismans on her. He looked at Ji Xinyu's small white hand and turned his head away. I'll return the sound transmission talisman to you tomorrow afternoon. At that time, his recovery plan would be complete, and he wouldn't have to worry about her leaking any more secrets. Ji Xinyue's face was as white as snow. She sneered, Are you afraid that I'll leak the secret? Just give me that pink sound-transmitting talisman. You should know that it's only for contacting Tianyu and can't contact anyone else. Siejuk, what? You don't dare to do this? If you don't even dare to do this, then it's enough to prove that everything you showed me just now is fake. It's fake. I don't believe a single word. Xie stared at her for a moment before turning to instruct Huang Luqing, go and ask the left guardian for that pink voice transmission talisman. Huang Luqing frowned, young master. It's all right. I recognize that voice transmission talisman. It can only be used to contact Ji Tianyue. Hurry up and go. Xie was impatient. Huang Luqing. He took a deep look at Xie before turning around and leaving. A moment later, he returned with the pink sound transmission talisman. He tossed it to Ji Xinyue, who immediately contacted Ji Tianyue. Of course, there was no response from the other side. It wasn't that the other side refused to pick it up, but there was no response. The pink sound transmission talisman didn't even flash. Chapter 3055. There was only one possibility for such a situation. The other party was already dead, and the voice transmission talisman forged from each other's aura would completely lose its effect. Ji Xinyue stared at the voice transmission talisman in her hand as if she was sensing something. A moment later, the voice transmission talisman in her palm emitted flames and turned into ashes. It turned out that Ji Tianyue's soul had also been dispelled. Dispelled? What a vicious method. Although Ji Tianyue had done a few things to her later on, they weren't really evil. It was just a child's jealousy that made her mischievous. She had severed her relationship with this little sister out of disappointment. However, she had still doted on her for hundreds of years. Now, not only had she died a tragic death, her soul had also been dispelled forever. This was too much. Ji Xinyue's face was ashen. Why did you kill her? Xie? Ah. Why did you kill Tianyue? Ji Xinyue asked angrily. Xie did not expect her to be concerned about this. He was stunned for a moment before frowning slightly. That kind of trash no longer has any value. She even schemed against you. Why keep such a person alive? Used again. Ji Xinyue clenched her fists. Xie, in your eyes, is the relationship between people only about using and being used? Don't you have any kinship or friendship? Master was used by you, senior brothers were also used by you. You don't care about their lives at all. To think that they usually treat you so well. In the past, when you were in danger, they were the first to rush up and save you. They treated you as a real brother, but you only wanted their lives. The more she spoke, the angrier she became. Her voice became louder and louder, and her body trembled. She was truly furious. Xie expression changed. He opened his mouth and was about to say something when Huang Luqing suddenly stepped forward. With a flick of her finger, a wisp of wind flashed and sealed Ji Xinyue's sleeping acupoint, causing her to fall asleep again. What are you doing? Xie frowned unhappily. Huang Luqing bowed to him. You can't let her nonsense mess up young master's mind. Young master, you still have a big battle tomorrow. Just now, you blindly used the mirror technique and used your vitality. You must quickly meditate and recover. You can't delay for a moment. Xie understood this point. He first carried the unconscious Ji Xinyue and laid her down on the bed, tucking her in the corner of the blanket. Then, he stood up and casually threw a futon on the ground, wanting to sit on it. I'll just meditate here to recover. Huang Luqing. He suppressed his anger and raised his hand to rub his throbbing temples. Young master, this meditation is no small matter. There must be no external interference. Moreover, it would require an ice room. Young master, your recovery is the most important thing right now. As for this Princess Ji Xinyue, you and her have a long future ahead of you. You'll have plenty of time to look after her in the future, right? Young master, the bigger picture is more important. Xie fell silent for a moment. How long will it take for me to recover? Huang Luqing pondered for a moment. About 2 hours. Xie nodded. All right, I'll come back in 2 hours. Keep an eye on her and don't let anything happen to her. He turned around and strode away. The room became quiet again. Huang Luqing stood in the middle of the room, her gaze landing on the unconscious Ji Xinyue. Her gaze was faintly complicated. Originally, young master had always been straightforward when dealing with women. The women he fancied who disobeyed him were either slapped to death or raped by him. Chapter 3056. However, he had paid an unprecedented amount of patience for this Ji Xinyu. After being provoked by her with a few words, he actually used the mirror technique regardless of the consequences. If he had not discovered it in time, there would have been a huge mess tomorrow, causing all his previous efforts to be in vain. This woman had a great influence on the young master. This was definitely not a good thing. Huang Luqing clenched his fists slightly, as if he wanted to do something, but he endured it. It was easy for him to kill her now, but if the young master knew, he would definitely fight him to the death. He was not afraid of risking his life, but now that things had come to this, he even had the heart to risk his life with the young master. He was afraid that once Ji Xinyu died, Xiejuk would risk his life to gather her soul and revive her. At that time, it would definitely delay tomorrow's plan. If he destroyed her soul, with Xiejuk's current feelings for her, he would definitely become enemies with her. Therefore, he could not touch this woman at the moment. However, this woman was extremely fierce and had good martial arts. She also had deep feelings for her senior brothers. If the young master successfully recovered tomorrow, her senior brothers would definitely not be able to protect her. She would probably think of ways to take revenge, and Xiejuk might not be able to subdue her in a short period of time. His eyes darkened as he slowly walked to the Moonlight Pearl. He pressed his palm on the Moonlight Pearl, and a wave of blue light flashed on the Moonlight Pearl before disappearing. The Moonlight Pearl did not change and still emitted a faint white light. After doing all this, he turned around and was about to leave when he suddenly stopped. Looking at Ji Xinyu's sleeping face, a dark light flickered in his eyes. He could not get the young master to stay away from this woman, and this woman was so dangerous. She was a huge variable. Perhaps he should completely cripple her cultivation and make her an ordinary woman. That way, no matter how much the young master doted on her, she would not be able to stir up trouble. He turned around and approached Ji Xinyu's bed, raising his palm. "What are you doing?" A cold voice suddenly came from behind him. Huang Luqing slowly turned his head and saw Sect Master Ziyun leaning against the door, looking at him indifferently. With this sect master here, Huang Luqing naturally would not do anything to Ji Xinyu. He waved the fan in his hand and said, "I just want to see if she's really unconscious or just faking it." As he spoke, he had already reached the door. When he passed by Sect Master Ziyun, he paused and said, "I'll leave this place to you. I'm going to see the young master." With a meaningful smile, he turned and walked out. Sect Master Ziyun stood in place for a moment, then slowly walked to Ji Xinyu's bed. He lowered his head and looked at her for a moment, then sighed. Little 8. This disciple was not accepted for the mission, but because he truly liked this child. It was because he truly liked her that he accepted her as his disciple. Just now, when he had plotted against her in the Beast Valley, when she had slowly collapsed, he had seen her eyes. She had looked at him with eyes full of despair and disbelief. That kind of gaze pierced him. He naturally knew how big of a blow this matter was to Ji Xinyu, so he couldn't bear to let her know. Because some sacrifices were destined to be made, and it was a task that he could not shake off, he did not want Ji Xinyu to get too close to her senior brothers. When he took her in, his other disciples had already finished their apprenticeship, and they did not see each other often. It was only on his birthday that these disciples would see each other. Especially during the years when he taught Ji Xinyu martial arts, other than the eldest disciple, the other disciples could only come back once a year. They were not allowed to come back usually. Chapter 3057. And at that time, Sect Master Ziyun had intentionally or unintentionally separated her from her senior brothers, not allowing them to contact each other. He thought that by doing this, Ji Xinyu's relationship with her senior brothers wouldn't be too good, just barely average. But he didn't expect that Ji Xinyu, this child, was born with a strong sense of kinship and actually got along very well with her senior brothers. Especially after she finished her apprenticeship, she would often run over to her senior brothers' residences as guests. When he realized that something was wrong and wanted to warn her, She was already closer to them than blood brothers. Sect Master Ziyun originally wanted to hide this matter from Ji Xinyu, so when Ji Xinyu rushed back, he made her fall into a deep sleep. As long as she could sleep for 2 days, the entire matter would be settled. He could create an illusion that a blood-sucking monster had destroyed the entire Purple Cloud sect. That way, Ji Xinyu wouldn't know the truth when she woke up. At most, she would plan to take revenge for her senior brothers, but she wouldn't feel the despair of being betrayed. But he didn't expect that she would wake up early, and even more didn't expect that she would investigate the matter in such a short period of time. He couldn't do anything about it. Now, this kind of blow was almost fatal to her. But there was no other way out. Xinyu, I'm sorry, Master was also helpless? Sect Master Ziyun sat in front of Ji Xinyu's bed, holding one of her hands by the bed, and sighed softly. And it was at this moment that the sudden change happened. Ji Xinyu, who had been sleeping, suddenly flipped her wrist, and her fingertips directly hit Sect Master Ziyun's waist. Sect Master Ziyun was in a daze, and was caught off guard by her attack. Half of his body immediately went numb. He wanted to jump up, but Ji Xinyu was faster than him. Her finger poked a few times on his body, and as a result, Sect Master Ziyun couldn't move at all. Xinyu. His usually calm and handsome face revealed a rare look of surprise. They actually weren't asleep. Ji Xinyu jumped to the ground, her gaze landing on her master's face, flashing slightly, and then looking away. She said indifferently, "It's true that I was poked by Master, but I've already undone it." In other words, when Huang Luqing struck her sleeping acupuncture point, she had already returned to normal. She was just lying down and pretending to be asleep, and then slowly looking for an opportunity. Just now, when Huang Luqing was about to make a move on her, she naturally sensed it. On the surface, she was still sleeping, but her body was already prepared to fight to the death with the other party. She didn't expect that her master would come and stop Huang Luqing in time, allowing her to continue pretending to be asleep. Sect Master Ziyun looked at Xinyu, whose eyes were sparkling, and had mixed feelings. "Xinyu, your martial art seems to have improved quite a bit." His acupoint sealing skills were clearly top-notch. Even a top-notch expert wouldn't be able to unseal his acupoint after a day and a night. Who would have thought that Ji Xinyu would be able to solve it in just 2 hours, and even beat him at his own game? Ji Xinyu lowered her eyes slightly. Her martial arts had indeed improved a lot compared to before. Especially after cultivating on Rongyue Tianlan's small island, the effect was even more obvious, and it was even becoming more obvious. She had said so much nonsense to Xiejuk just now because she wanted to buy time to unseal her acupoints. She did not believe the truth Xiejuk had told her at all. Compared to the safety of his senior brothers, all those emotional entanglements were nothing. For the time being, it was not in her consideration. However, even she herself did not expect that one day she would make a move on her most respected and beloved master, and make him unable to move. Chapter 3058. Looking at her master who was sitting there, she hesitated for a moment. Then, she steeled her heart and went to her master's storage space to search for her things. There were a lot of things in Sect Master Ziyun's storage space. It was even more complete than a large warehouse. It was undoubtedly difficult to search for a few small voice transmission talismans in such a large storage space, not to mention that she had to be face to face with her master when searching for his storage space. This was a position that she had never thought of before. If someone looked in from outside the window now, they would think that she was being rebellious and trying to take liberties with her master. Sect Master Ziyun naturally knew what she was searching for. He didn't say anything and just looked at her, letting her search. Being stared at like this, Ji Xinyu became even more nervous. Sweat dripped from the tip of her nose. She suddenly said, "Master, do you really have the heart to kill my senior brothers? They clearly respect you so much and spend so much effort on your birthday every year. If they hear any disrespectful words about you outside, they will rush up and fight with their lives. Are they just tools in your eyes? Master, are you being controlled by that devil Xiejuk? I don't believe that you are the guardian of the devil race. You clearly hate evil the most." Ji Xinyue originally spoke to ease the awkwardness, but when she said this, her heart was touched, and her eyes couldn't help but turn red. Sect Master Ziyun's face was slightly pale, and he lowered his eyes. Xinyue, I am indeed the left guardian of the devil race. Xiejuk, he can't control me. But I don't believe it. You don't have any devil aura at all. How can you be a devil with so much immortal aura? Master is indeed not a devil. Master is a fallen immortal. Sect Master Ziyun finally revealed his true identity. Ji Xinyue, fallen immortals did exist. Fallen immortals were originally immortals, but because of something, they fell into the devil realm and became a devil. Although such a person was in the devil sect, if he didn't do anything evil, there wouldn't be any devil aura on his body. Master, isn't cultivation good? Why would I become a devil? Master, look, all your disciples are also cultivating the immortal Tao. Why would he become a devil? It was all because of love. However, he didn't want to tell Ji Xinyue this reason. He simply closed his eyes and said indifferently, Xinyue, Master has his own difficulties. It seemed that persuasion would not work. Master had already made up his mind to use his disciples as sacrifices for the Devil Lord to recover his power. Ji Xinyue felt a sense of helplessness. This feeling of powerlessness spread to her limbs and bones, causing her chest to feel stifled and suffocated. It was as if there was a fire burning inside, but she couldn't find a way out. She pursed her lips and said, Master, I'm sorry. I won't watch my senior brothers die. I'll expose this matter. Her fingertips finally touched a sound-transmitting talisman. She hurriedly took it out to take a look, and her heart was filled with joy. This sound-transmitting talisman was the blue star talisman that she used to contact Rong Yuetian. She hurriedly put it into her storage space and was about to take out other things when there was a sudden movement at the door, followed by a low cry, Little junior sister. Feng Wuji, eldest senior brother. He actually came in, and when he saw Ji Xinyue lying in Sect Master Ziyun's arms at the door, he was dumbfounded. Ji Xinyue did not give him any time to react. With a flash of her body, she suddenly charged in his direction. Feng Wuji instinctively dodged and Ji Xinyue rushed out the door like a bolt of lightning. Chapter 3059. By the time Feng Wuji reacted and wanted to grab her, he did not even manage to grab a corner of her clothes. His expression changed. He wanted to chase after her but was stopped by his master. Wuji, help me unseal my acupoints. Feng Wuji quickly went over to unseal his acupoints. Left guardian, Xinyue will definitely inform the others once she escapes. I'm afraid that tomorrow's plan will not work. We must stop her immediately. I think we should inform military advisor Huang. At this point, he could no longer continue, because the moment Sect Master Ziyun's acupoint was unsealed, he had hit his death acupoint with a backhand. He slowly fell to the ground. Before he fell, his eyes were still wide open as he stared at Grandmaster Ziyun. But, he asked the question in his heart, but he could no longer wait for the answer. Grandmaster Ziyun looked down at his corpse and said coldly, There's no reason. Elder Lin, I've tolerated you for a long time. Feng Wuji used to be his eldest disciple, but later on, Elder Lin of the demon race took over his body to conceal the demonic qi in his body. He was also a spy that Huang Luqing had planted beside Grandmaster Ziyun to help him recruit disciples and manage everything in the Beast Valley. Grandmaster Ziyun moved his body and went out. Ji Xinyue already had a plan in mind while she was escaping. The moment she escaped, she activated the sound transmission talisman with Rongyue Tianlan. At the most crucial moment, she thought of him first. Perhaps it was because he was sleeping in the middle of the night. The sound transmission talisman flashed for a long time but no one picked up. Ji Xinyue was burning with anxiety. She wanted to reach out and shake the person on the other end of the sound transmission talisman awake. Rongyuelan, you pig! Sleeping like a pig! She dialed twice but could not get through. She had no choice but to put it aside for now. She looked up at the sky. It was almost 5 o'clock. Even if she ran out to get help now, it would be too late. After all, the nearest sect was almost 4 hours away. It would take 8 hours to go back and forth. By then, the great array would have been activated. Distant water could not quench a present thirst. If she wanted to save someone, she had to take a risk. Ji Shenyue thought that as long as she raised her arm and shouted, as long as her voice was loud enough, she would be able to attract everyone to watch. At that time, she would only need to shout. That's a soul-absorbing array, a deadly array, an array set up to help Xie recover his cultivation. She knew that no one would really believe her if she screamed like this, but after all, it was a matter of life and death, so they would still be suspicious. Once there was suspicion, there would be changes, and the formation would not be set up again. Then, the lives of her senior martial brothers and junior martial nephews would be saved, and the tragedy would not happen. She also knew that if she raised her arm and called for help, she would definitely attract Huang Luqing and Xie to chase after her. Her own situation was worrying. But she couldn't care less right now. Her eldest senior brother had already discovered that she had run away. After he unsealed her master's acupoints, the two of them would quickly chase after her and inform Huang Luqing and Xie. It would only take a moment for the four of them to chase after her. She had no time to inform her senior martial brothers one by one. She and her senior martial brothers were very close. How could she bear to watch them die? Therefore, she was going all out. Xie courtyard was a little remote. It was not close to the courtyards where the other senior martial brothers lived. There was even a large distance between them. Chapter 3060. Xie courtyard was at the top of the mountain. While the guest rooms were halfway up the mountain, Ji Shenyu's heart felt like a basin of fire was burning, causing the blood in her entire body to flow faster. She dashed down like lightning, the cold wind brushing past her cheeks. She even felt that the wind was scorching hot. Seeing that the dense mass of buildings in front of her was getting closer and closer, Ji Shenyu steeled her heart and finally shouted out. She had used her inner strength to shout out these words, so she could guarantee that her voice would reach the corners of the large building in front of her, and that everyone could hear her. After shouting, she heaved a sigh of relief and raised her hand to wipe the sweat off her forehead. No matter what, she had shouted out, so everyone should have heard it. Soon, someone would come out. Then, after she shouted, no one flew out of the large building. Even the guards did not move. It was deep into the night in the dense mass of buildings, and not a single sound could be heard. What was going on? Ji Shenyu finally arrived in front of the building. Just as she was about to charge forward and shout again, she was bounced back by a faint wave of light. When Ji Shenyu saw the light wave clearly, her heart sank to the bottom of the ground. Barrier. All the buildings here were shrouded by an invisible barrier. There was not a single gap. This kind of barrier was undoubtedly soundproof, so even if she shouted until her voice was hoarse, the people inside would not be able to hear her. Hee hee. A light laugh suddenly sounded. Ji Shenyu suddenly turned her head, and a man slowly appeared from the shadows not far away. He was dressed in a light green robe, had elegant features, and was as handsome as jade. He was like a hermit young master. Who would have thought that such a person would be the military advisor of the demon race who killed without blinking an eye? Could he be the instigator of all this? Ji Shenyu's eyes narrowed, and she raised her hand to draw her azure saber. The moon god's sword had disappeared the moment she was knocked out. Ji Shenyu had not seen it since she woke up, so she decided not to count on that random divine sword anymore. She had to rely on herself at the crucial moment. It seems that I still underestimated Princess Shenyu to be able to escape in this kind of situation. Fortunately, this military advisor made preparations early on and set up a barrier here, causing Princess Shenyu's efforts to be in vain. Huang Luqing waved his folding fan lightly as he spoke, a trace of guilt appearing on his handsome face. Ji Shenyue took a deep breath, too lazy to talk nonsense with him. The azure saber slashed directly at the barrier. Huang Liuqing's eyes flashed, but she didn't have any intention of stopping her. The azure saber struck the barrier with an aura that could split mountains and sever seas, but it was as if it had struck the air. The blade had clearly cut into the barrier, but it did not make the slightest sound. Then, the knife bounced back. Ji Shenyu's fingers were numb from the rebounding force, and her entire body was cold. She couldn't open this barrier. It wasn't something she could open. This barrier could only be set up by exalted immortals, and only exalted immortals could break it. She suddenly raised her head to look at Huang Luqing. You're an exalted immortal? Huang Luqing waved his fan. Our Sharkmen doesn't cultivate the immortal Tao, so I'm not an exalted immortal, but at my level, I'm roughly at the exalted immortal realm level. This person's ability to conceal himself was really deep. Ji Xinyu knew that he usually hid his strength, but she didn't expect him to hide so much. Chapter 3061. She was clearly an exalted immortal, but she usually kept a low profile like an immortal monarch. Princess Xinyu, what do you want now? Huang Luqing looked as if victory was already in her hands. Huang Luqing, you set up such a large barrier here. When the people inside wake up and see this barrier, they will be suspicious. Do you think the people inside are idiots? Ji Xinyu sneered. Huang Luqing closed her fan and smiled. You're wrong. This barrier can only be seen by the people outside. The people inside can't see it, and they can even come out at will. But do you think they can come out at this time? Ji Xinyu. Her face was pale and she retreated step by step. Huang Luqing slowly approached. Princess Xinyu, although you are the young master's favorite, you have tried to ruin my plans time and time again. This is making things difficult for me. Perhaps I should kill you and end this once and for all? As she spoke, she slowly opened her fan. A white figure flashed over and landed between Ji Xinyu and Huang Luqing, shielding Ji Xinyu behind her. That white figure only said 2 words to Ji Xinyu, "Go!" Master. The one protecting her behind him was Sect Master Ziyun. Her master actually came to save her. Ji Xinyu's eyes widened and her heart surged. Master! She called out with a trembling voice. Go! Sect Master Ziyun threw out another word. Although Ji Xinyu's heart was filled with countless questions and emotions, she also knew that she could not stay for long. She turned around and flew away. Huang Luqing looked at Sect Master Ziyun, who was blocking her path. Sect Master, are you trying to betray your master? She is my disciple. Letting her go will not hinder the Devil Master's recovery plan. Sect Master Ziyun stared into Huang Luqing's eyes. Let her go. I will not allow anything to happen to her. Huang Luqing smiled and said in a mocking tone, I didn't know that Sect Master was so concerned about his disciple. With you like this, I'm worried about the great array tomorrow. There are so many disciples and grand disciples, what if you can't bear to part with them? Sect Master Ziyun's face was slightly pale, but his voice was cold. That's different. Tomorrow, the array will be activated as usual. I know my responsibilities. Huang Luqing nodded. It's good that you know. She glanced at the other party and suddenly sneered. Don't tell me you also fell in love with that princess? Sect Master Ziyun was stunned. Then he shouted angrily, Bullshit. This seat treats her like a daughter, and there is absolutely no love between us. To think that the Sect Master Ziyun, who has always been known for his elegance, would actually swear. How rare. Huang Luqing was half mocking and half laughing. Suddenly her face changed. You may like her or treat her like a woman, but you can't delay the Devil Lord's recovery plan. If she escapes like this, she will definitely inform the people outside. Sect Master Ziyun looked up at the sky and said indifferently, she doesn't have any communication talismans on her, so if she wants to inform the other sects, she has to make a trip personally. The Purple Cloud sect was located in a remote area and was not close to any other sect. The nearest sect would take 4 hours to travel to and fro, so it would take 8 hours to travel back and forth. After 8 hours, the array would be completely activated, and the Devil Lord's martial arts would be completely restored. What was there to be afraid of? What's more, that sect is not a big one, and the highest cultivation is only Immortal Monarch. Moreover, the leader of that sect is usually timid and afraid of trouble. Even if Xinyu asks him for help, he will not come. Most likely he will lead his disciples to other sects to discuss countermeasures, so there is nothing to worry about. Chapter 3062. Huang Luqing raised her eyebrows and said, "It seems that Sect Master has calculated everything very clearly. However, I heard that this princess has the ability to travel 1,000 miles in an instant. What if she uses this technique to inform others?" The Purple Cloud Sect Master sneered. Military advisor Huang probably doesn't know that other than that small sect that is not worth worrying about, the closest sect to the Purple Cloud sect that is qualified to destroy is at least 8 hours away from here. Even if Xinyu notifies them now, they won't be able to come in time. Huang Luqing sighed. "All right, for the sake of the sect master, I will let the princess go. However, you know the temper of the Devil Lord. After he comes out of seclusion, if he sees that the princess is missing, I am afraid that he will fly into a rage. Maybe he will think that I killed the princess and then threw her corpse away. Maybe it will cause chaos because of this. Sect Master, what do you think about this? Do you want me to tell the truth? Or do you want me to cooperate with you so that Devil Master can believe our reasons and then focus on the recovery of the array?" At this point, the two of them were already grasshoppers on the same rope, so Sect Master Ziyun naturally chose to cooperate. Huang Luqing smiled. "Sect Master is indeed a smart person. Let's go and deal with the aftermath." The two of them left together. Before leaving, Huang Luqing glanced in the direction Ji Xinyu escaped with a smile on her lips. This result was better than he had expected. From now on, he was no longer afraid that Ji Xinyu would pose any threat to the Devil Master. Although the Devil Master was very promiscuous and had a lot of concubines, he was still a clean freak. No matter how beautiful or delicate a girl was, once she lost her chastity, she was worthless in the eyes of the Devil Master. Half an hour later, Xie hurried out. Just as Huang Luqing had expected, he flew into a rage when he saw Ji Xinyu disappear. He really thought that Huang Luqing had secretly killed her. Fortunately, Sect Master Ziyun and Huang Luqing worked together to create a lie, saying that Ji Xinyu had indeed escaped. Xie still believed in Sect Master Ziyun, his former master, so he stopped looking for trouble with Huang Luqing. He still wanted to go out and look for her, but Huang Luqing stopped him, saying that after Ji Xinyu escaped, she would definitely inform the others. Once the Devil Lord's identity was exposed, and the Devil Lord's martial arts had not recovered, it would be an irreversible loss to the entire Devil clan. Furthermore, the Devil Lord's safety was also a problem, so the Devil Lord's recovery time could not be delayed. Huang Luqing's last sentence was well said. "Young master, as long as you recover all of your power, you will be the strongest person in this world." At that time, if you want to find Princess Ji Xinyu, won't it be easy? Even if you want her to be your wife, it won't be too difficult. If you can't recover your strength, then young master will be desperately hunted down by the people of this world. At that time, your life will be in danger, so how can you talk about continuing your fate with Princess Ji Xinyu? These words finally moved Xie heart. After nodding, he looked at Huang Luqing and could not help but ask, "Huang Luqing, I see that you're even more anxious than me." Huang Luqing's gaze landed on his face. After looking at him for a moment, she turned her head away. This subordinate only wants young master to fully recover. Actually, I've always been very curious. For the sake of my resurrection, you persevered for a full 30,000 years and painstakingly planned. Now, for the sake of my complete recovery, you've exhausted your efforts. What exactly are you after? Chapter 3063. A demon was a demon. Being two-faced and treacherous was the label of a demon. Xie had also returned to the declining demon world. The demons there were fighting each other for territory, and no one knew each other. The demons there did not know that there was once a demon master. The name of Demon Master Xie had long been forgotten by the demons. After he reported his name, those demons were all confused. Time was like a pig slaughtering knife, cutting the glory of the past into pieces. Xie name was almost forgotten by everyone in the Sanskrit continent. Compared to them, Huang Luqing was so loyal that it shocked the world. A hint of sadness flashed across Huang Luqing's eyes. Yes, what was he after? He turned around indifferently. Shark men are all obsessed. I just want young master to remember everything in the past. All right, Young master's complexion is not good. There are still 2 hours before the formation opens. Young master should sit down and recuperate. I'll go and make some arrangements to make sure nothing goes wrong. He turned around and left. Siejuk frowned. Remember everything in the past? Because he had slept for too long, his memories were indeed not complete. There was a large gap between them. However, the most important thing was that he had already remembered everything. What was the point of remembering some minor details? He shook his head and thought of Ji Xinyue again. He was still worried and looked at Sect Master Ziyun. Left Guardian, did you see Xinyue escape with your own eyes? Sect Master Ziyun nodded slightly and answered with a simple word, yes. Siejuk's eyes flickered slightly. As long as she was fine, it was fine. It was the same when he completely recovered and went to search for her. She was the obsession of that part of his soul, and she had also indirectly become his obsession. He would not give up until he obtained her. He seemed to have thought of something and instructed, if she runs away, so be it. In the future, I will naturally have a way to make her return to my side and be my woman. Left Guardian, you can follow Huang Luqing and make the best preparations to open the formation. He was originally worried about Huang Luqing, afraid that he would do something to Ji Xinyue in advance, so he wanted Sect Master Ziyun to follow him to prevent him from causing trouble. As soon as the words left his mouth, he felt that he could not make it too obvious. However, he believed that with Sect Master Ziyun's intelligence, he would be able to guess it. Sect Master Ziyun lowered his eyes and agreed, then turned around and left. When Sect Master Ziyun found Huang Luqing, he was sitting on a huge rock on the mountain peak, lost in thought. The distant sky had already turned a little blue, and a faint trace of white could be seen. The sky was about to brighten. Huang Luqing glanced sideways at Sect Master Ziyun and said with a faint smile, "What are you doing here? Spying on me? Are you afraid that I'll secretly hurt your precious disciple?" Sect Master Ziyun's voice was cold. "Young master asked me to come." This sentence made Huang Luqing choke. Huang Luqing stopped talking and turned to look at the sea of clouds in the sky. Sect Master Ziyun didn't say anything as he looked into the distance. Shen Yu should have already escaped, right? If nothing unexpected happened, she should have gone to look for Rongyue Tianlan. With Rongyue Tianlan by her side, no one should be able to hurt her. It was just that this incident had really broken her heart. He was afraid that their master-disciple relationship would be severed from now on. No matter what, it was fine as long as she lived well. Ji Xinyue did not go to Rongyue Tianlan's place. It was not that she threw a tantrum and did not want to go, but that she could not go. She was not living well. She was living very hard now. She was poisoned. Chapter 3064. After she escaped from the Purple Cloud sect, her analysis was the same as the sect masters. She had thought of all the reinforcements she could think of. Other than Rong Yuishenlin, no one else could arrive in time. She used the blue voice transmission talisman to contact Rong Yuishenlin twice, but it was like a clay ox sinking into the sea. No one picked up at all. Did he really not sense it, or did he deliberately not pick it up? Ji Xinyue finally remembered that they were still in a cold war when they broke up. Ever since she talked back to him, he had obviously become cold to her. He had been so polite that he didn't even touch her hand anymore. When he was about to leave, he didn't even greet her and just left. He hadn't returned since he left. The images that Siejuk had shown her flashed through her mind again, and she couldn't help but have a thought. Did he really go to see Yunxi? Did he really let Yunxi look for his wife in his previous life? Looking at the images that Siejuk and Huang Luqing had shown her, Rong Yuishenlin was indeed with Yunxi. Had they already returned to the island? Had Yunxi, that bird, determined that she wasn't Jiyu based on the aura she had left behind, so Rong Yuishenlin had completely let go of her? Now, he had finally let go of everything from his previous life and flew away with Yunxi? So he didn't even bother to pick up her voice transmission talisman? No, that was fake. Siejuk must have deliberately made it up to make her give up. She didn't want to believe it. But why didn't he pick up the voice transmission talisman? Ordinary immortals wouldn't sleep so soundly, right? Or had he also encountered an accident? Countless thoughts churned in her heart like boiling water, causing her heart to tighten and ache. In addition, she was worried about the safety of her senior brothers, but she couldn't do anything at the moment. She really wanted to cry. She really wanted to find someone to rely on so that she could cry to her heart's content. But she couldn't. Now was not the time for her to be weak and cry. She had to think of a way to save her senior brothers. She couldn't just watch them die. She closed her eyes and suppressed all the messy thoughts in her mind. Right now, saving people was her first priority. Everything else was fleeting. She couldn't let her imagination run wild. She should quickly think of a plan to save people, but even though she had thought of every single path, none of them seemed to work. What should she do? What should she do? She saw that the eastern sky was gradually turning white, but she couldn't think of a decent plan. She was anxious, so anxious that the blood in her body was boiling like boiling water. Her body was hot, and her face was red. However, she was so focused on saving people that she didn't notice her abnormality. She looked up at the sky. The sky was high and the clouds were light. There was only the flowing wind around her. Standing there, she felt a sense of helplessness, as if she had been abandoned by the entire world. Too many things had happened tonight, and she had suffered too many blows. When one suffered too many blows, one's nerves would become numb. Some people would go crazy after receiving a fatal blow. They would be at a loss and their minds would go blank. On the other hand, after Ji Xinyue suffered a blow, she would subconsciously suppress all of her messy thoughts and focus on the important points. She stood there in a daze for a moment and then made up her mind to run back to the Purple Cloud sect to see if she could break the array before it opened. She was going all out. Worst comes to worst, she, Xie and Huang, these two people would have a bloody battle. Perhaps they could also obstruct them from activating that man-eating array. Just as she was about to use the teleportation technique, she staggered and felt dizzy. Chapter 3065. Just as she was about to use the teleportation technique, she staggered and felt dizzy. After she steadied herself, she realized that something was wrong with her body. It was already the beginning of winter, and her clothes were not thick, but her body was abnormally hot. Waves of heat surged through her body, and gradually gathered at an indescribable part below her abdomen. Scorching heat, emptiness, anxiety, fear, and longing, countless indescribable feelings howled in her body, causing her body to go weak. Was she poisoned? This poison was so strange. Ji Xinyue had never tasted such a feeling before. It was like pain and longing, and the faces of men flashed through her mind. It was strange. She had known many men in her life, and there was no lack of beauties. However, in her eyes, they were no different from dirt and stone, and could not arouse any pink thoughts. But now, when she thought of these people again, she felt that they were all so pleasing to the eye that she wanted to pounce on them. In the end, Rongyue Tianlan's appearance appeared in her mind. In the depths of her heart, she had some kind of indescribable resentment towards him. But at this moment, when his appearance flashed through her mind, the blood in her body surged even more violently. In a trance, she seemed to see him standing not far away, looking at her with a smile. The blood in her head buzzed, and her body acted before her brain, pouncing towards him. Rongyue Tianlan. At this moment, the only thing she thought of was his embrace. She wanted to jump into his arms and let him hug her. Bang! She crashed into Rongyue Tianlan's embrace. Her knees hurt terribly, and the intense pain made her sober up instantly. There was no Rongyue Tianlan in front of her. There was only a slender stone standing there. She hugged the stone, and her knees hit the stone. She took 2 steps back, and finally understood what poison she had been poisoned with. Aphrodisiac. When did she get poisoned? Who drugged her? Huang Lujing? Xiejuk? The latter was more likely. After all, this person always had delusions about her, and did things by hook or by crook. Ji Xinyue's body became hotter and hotter, and her vision became blurry. She pinched herself again, and the pain stimulated her to stay awake. She knew that finding the real culprit was secondary. The most important thing was to detoxify. Detoxify? She tried her best to suppress her boiling qi and blood. Her fingers trembled as she rummaged through her storage space. Originally, she had a lot of medicine in her storage space. However, after being caught and fainted again and again, most of the medicine in there had been taken away. Especially the last time she fell asleep. Xiejuk was probably dissatisfied that she had used Rongyu Ishanlin's medicine, so he took advantage of the time when she was unconscious to loot all the medicine in her storage space. Now, there were only 3 or 4 bottles of golden sore medicine in there, and Xiejuk had forced them on her. There was no medicine for that. There wasn't even an antidote for the drug. Bastard. Despicable bastard. Despicable. Ji Xinyu bit her lips tightly, using the pain to keep her mind clear. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation, and her body was so hot that she couldn't stop shaking. It was a cold day and she wasn't wearing thick clothes, but she felt so hot. It was as if she was wearing a large cotton-padded jacket during the hottest days of the summer. The heat made her feel irritated and irritated. The tip of her nose, forehead, and chin were all covered in sweat. It was so hot that she wished she could tear off all the clothes on her body. Chapter 3066. However, her rationality told her that she absolutely could not do that. She looked around anxiously and finally saw a small river not far away. She staggered and jumped into the river. The river water was bone-chilling and slightly relieved some of the heat in her body. It also made her slightly confused mind clear again. She squatted in the river for about a quarter of an hour and knew that the cold river water could only slightly relieve the symptoms, but it could not detoxify the poison. She still needed to save people. Time waited for no one. She had to find a way to detoxify the poison. But how could this poison be detoxified? Who could detoxify her? Who could detoxify her in such a desolate place? She squatted in the river and trembled slightly. This was the first time in her life that she felt so helpless. Tears welled up, but she forced them back. She could not cry. Crying was useless. Because she had to endure the strange heat in her body, she bit her lips until they bled. She wiped her eyes with her hand, and her fingertips were stained with blood, but she did not notice. She thought of Rongyue Tianlan again. He was a medical immortal, and his medical skills were extraordinary. If he was here, he might be able to detoxify her. She trembled as she took out the voice transmission talisman again. The blood on her fingertips stained the voice transmission talisman, and the talisman actually emitted a faint light wave and absorbed all the blood. Ji Xinyue's mind was filled with thoughts of asking for help, so she did not notice this. Her fingers trembled as she activated the voice transmission talisman again. Thankfully, this time, the voice transmission talisman lit up for a moment before the other side picked it up. The moment the call connected, Ji Xinyue's heartbeat almost went out of control. She let out a long sigh of relief. Heat and grievance instantly surged up. She trembled as she said, "Your Highness Rongyue," because of her unstable state of mind, and also because of the effects of the drug, her originally clear and melodious voice sounded watery and crooked, with a hint of hoarseness. Finally, a reply came from the other side. Ji Xinyue staggered in the water and almost fell into the water. That voice belonged to a girl. It was as clear as jade and as ethereal as the clouds. Even without seeing the person, she could feel that the other party was a peerless beauty. Ji Xinyue stared blankly at the voice transmission talisman in her hand. The image that Xiejuk had shown her flashed before her eyes. Rongyue Tianlan and that girl called Yunxi were walking side by side. Due to the effects of the drug, her breathing was heavy. Her body was hot, but her heart was cold. She had always been skeptical about what Xiejuk had shown her. She had planned to ask him directly when she saw Rongyu Ishanlin one day and ask him for confirmation. She wanted to get the truest answer from him. But now, it seemed that what Xiejuk had shown her was most likely true. Voice transmission talismans were usually carried around at all times. If Rongyue Tianlan cared about her, she would have kept a voice transmission talisman with her at all times. Now this voice transmission talisman was with Yunxi. "Hey, may I ask who you are?" the woman asked curiously. Ji Xinyu's heart had already sunk to the bottom of an icy abyss, but she still refused to give up. Forcing herself to calm down, she asked, "Where is Her Highness Rongyu?" "You asked him to pick up the sound-transmitting talisman." His voice trembled slightly. The person on the other side paused for a moment, then said, "He's still resting." "For you." Ji Xinyue's finger flicked again, and the blue sound-transmitting talisman fell into the river and was washed away in the blink of an eye. She raised her head and looked at the sky. The sky was about to brighten, and there was a bit of white in the east. Chapter 3067. It was a moment before dawn, and most people had yet to wake up. His voice transmission talisman was in Yunxi's hands. He was still resting. All these factors combined made it easy for people to deduce a hopeless conclusion. Rong Yuishenlin and Yunxi were really cohabiting, and there was a promise between them. Rong Yuishenlin probably confirmed that Ji Xinyue was not Ji Yu through Yunxi's bird, so he finally let go of the burden in his heart and began to fulfill his promise with Yunxi. The two of them were deeply in love, and it was natural for them to do something good. Although Ji Xinyue was still a virgin and had not experienced those things between men and women, she had been in the pugilistic world and had come into contact with many flirtatious men. These men also treated her as a man, so they did not have any scruples when talking in front of her. Naturally, the men would talk about women and even some things in bed. For example, they would be tired after doing things, so tired that they would not want to move. If they were really tired, even a person who was usually alert would sleep like a pig. She had been unable to contact Rong Yuishenlin just now. Was it because they were too tired and could not hear or see? The aphrodisiac originally made her feel like her body was on fire, but at this moment her heart felt like it was frozen. She took a deep breath and then another, to hold back the tears that were about to come. She desperately told herself that Rong Yuishenlin did not owe her anything. Although he had been ambiguous with her a few times, he probably treated her as someone else and doted on her. He even risked his life to save her a few times. If there was a debt, it was she who owed him. She owed him a favor, so she could not blame him. But, since he did not really love her, why did he mess up her spring water? Bastard. She clearly did not want to have any feelings for him. She clearly did not want to love him. But because of his forceful intervention, she accidentally fell down. Ow, it was not too late. It was not too late for her to find out. After all, she had not promised him anything, and she had not even reciprocated his feelings. So it was not too late. She could still extricate herself beautifully in time. A few rooster crows came from afar. She trembled in shock and looked up at the sky. The sky in the distance was already showing a faint green color. The sky was about to brighten. Her senior brothers, no, now is not the time to be swayed by loyalty. She had to ask Rongyue Tianlon for help. Even if she didn't ask him to cure her poison, at least she had to ask him to come to the Ziyun sect to save her senior brothers. She subconsciously went to look for the voice transmission talisman, but the talisman had long been washed away by the current. She searched the water for a long time but to no avail. She hugged her arms and squatted in the water, lost in thought for a moment. Then she stood up trembling. No, she had to save herself. Azure City was a small city, and it was the closest city to the Purple Cloud sect. This place was more than 200 miles away from the Purple Cloud sect. For the people in the city, it would take a whole day to reach the Purple Cloud sect. However, for cultivators with cultivation skills, it was only a 10-minute journey. When the sun had just risen, the door of one of the most famous physicians in Azure City was filled with loud bangs. Physician Lei suppressed his anger and opened the door. Before he could see the face of the person who was banging on the door, a woman drenched from head to toe rushed in. She grabbed his collar and said 2 words in a trembling voice, "Save me." The woman's fingers were hot, and her face was also hot. There was an unhealthy red color. Her eyes seemed to be filled with water and fire as she looked straight at Physician Lei. Chapter 3068. She staggered and almost fell into Dr. Lei's arms. Fortunately, she steadied herself in time, but her body couldn't help but tremble. It was as if she wanted to do something, but she resisted. After all, Dr. Lei was an experienced and knowledgeable doctor. Seeing the woman's expression, he took her pulse and frowned. "Miss, you've been poisoned by an aphrodisiac." This woman was naturally Ji Xinyu. She resisted the desire to pounce on Dr. Lei and nodded. She said hoarsely, "Save me, it was useless. It was completely useless." Dr. Lei, Dr. Li, Dr. Zhang, Ji Xinyu staggered. She had already eaten all the pills and ointments that these doctors had prescribed for her, but they couldn't cure the aphrodisiac's poison at all. "Miss, this old man can't cure this kind of aphrodisiac. Miss, this drug can't be cured. Miss, please redeem this little one's incompetence. Miss, this drug. I'm afraid there's only one way to cure this drug, and a man's true despair." Her body was so hot that it was about to explode, and her vision was turning black. It was as if countless ants had drilled into her limbs and bones, wantonly crawling around inside. It made her want to scream, to moan. If it's not cured, what will happen? She forced herself to ask. These doctors had never seen such a strong aphrodisiac before, and they were all helpless. Of course, they still admired this girl. If an ordinary girl had been poisoned by such a drug, she would have long forgotten about people under the influence of the drug. Perhaps she would even pounce on a bald or pockmarked man. However, this woman had been forcing herself to stay awake. Not only did she not pounce on these doctors like wolves or tigers, she even kept a distance from them as much as possible. However, she shouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. "If it's not cured, I'm afraid Miss will explode and die. Miss, your life is important." Ji Xinyu rushed out of the door. It was still early, and the streets were deserted. Ji Xinyu staggered along the streets in the direction of the only small building in the city. She was not afraid of death, but her life was connected to the lives of hundreds of people in the Purple Cloud sect. Therefore, she could only cure the poison. She had already decided not to marry in this life, so there was no need to protect her body at this critical moment. After curing the poison, she would return to the Purple Cloud sect to save people and fight Xiejuk. If she couldn't save them, then she would just die with them. This world was too ugly, and she had lived long enough. Rong Yutanlan felt exceptionally uneasy tonight. By the time he and Yunxi returned to Carefree Island, it was already late at night. They naturally discovered that Ji Xinyu had disappeared. Before the girl left, she left him a message. "Thank you for saving me. Goodbye." The date was early in the morning, even the time was included. Rong Yuedan could almost imagine the smug look on the little girl's face when she left. The soul-searching bird circled around the island before landing on Yunxi's shoulder and chirping happily. Yunxi translated the bird language for Rong Yue Tianlan. She said that the soul-searching bird felt that the aura left behind by Ji Xinyu here was similar to Ji Yu's aura. There was a high possibility that the two of them were the same person. Of course, if he wanted to confirm it, he still needed to meet the person in person. According to Rong Yue Tianlan's original intention, he couldn't wait to go out and search immediately. However, the soul-searching bird was very tired and was not willing to travel through the night to find someone. It simply spread its wings and lay on the ground, refusing to fly no matter what. Yunxi also advised, "Tianlan, Princess Xinyu only left. There won't be any accidents in just one night. Let's rest for the night and go find her tomorrow. I can see that you're also very tired right now. Why don't you rest for a while and have the energy to look for her tomorrow? It won't delay anything." Chapter 3069. Rong Yue Tianlan had been running around for the past few days and was extremely exhausted. After hearing Yunxi's words, he looked at the sky again. It was indeed too late. He looked at Yunxi again. Her hair was slightly messy, and her beautiful face was slightly haggard. She looked very sleepy. Under such circumstances, he was really embarrassed to ask Yunxi to go out and look for someone. He thought for a while and tried to contact Ji Xinyu with the voice transmission talisman. After a while, the voice transmission talisman was picked up. Ji Xinyue's voice came through. "What's the matter?" Rong Yue Tianlan chatted with her for a while and found out that she had returned to the Ziyun sect. Everyone in the Ziyun sect was safe now. She had been too tired from the journey and was now resting. Her voice was thick with sleepiness, and she was obviously very tired. After talking with him for a while, she hung up. Rongyue Tianlan also deliberately sensed the location of the blood-red voice transmission talisman. It was indeed in the Ziyun sect. She wasn't lying, so he was relieved. After thinking for a while, he and Yunxi agreed to set off for the Ziyun sect tomorrow morning. To Rongyue Tianlan, the whereabouts of Xie Huang and Ji Xinyue were unknown. He was afraid that there would be a big battle with them in the future, so he urgently needed to recover to his normal level. Fortunately, he hadn't used up too much of his telekinesis this time. As long as he cultivated in a specific place for a night, he should be able to fully recover. He also had a place that specialized in cultivating his telekinesis. Cultivating in that place was equivalent to cultivating in other places for 3 days. The only downside was that that place was isolated from the rest of the world. The voice transmission talisman couldn't receive any messages from there. Before Rongyue Tianlan entered that place to cultivate in seclusion, he wanted to contact Ji Xinyue again. However, when he thought of her sleepy voice just now, he didn't want to disturb her anymore. Forget it. She had his contact information anyway. If she really encountered danger that she couldn't solve herself, she would definitely use the voice transmission talisman to inform him. Because he couldn't connect to the voice transmission talisman while cultivating in that secret place, Rongyue Tianlan was also afraid that Ji Xinyue wouldn't be able to contact him while he was cultivating. Therefore, he gave all his voice transmission talismans to the outside world to Yunxi for safekeeping. He also told her that if there was any bad news from the blue voice transmission talisman, she must knock on the door to the secret place where he cultivated. Yunxi naturally agreed. When Rongyue Tianlan was at the Heavenly Bestowal continent, if he needed to go into seclusion for a short period of time and Yunxi happened to be a guest at his carefree island, he would ask her to help him. In this regard, the two of them had always cooperated very happily. Therefore, when Rongyue Tianlan handed over the voice transmission talisman to Yunxi, he felt very relieved. Speaking of which, it was strange. He had clearly arranged everything properly, but after entering the mystery realm, he felt somewhat uneasy. He kept feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. He didn't have Shinjioli's calculating ability, so he couldn't figure out the reason for his uneasiness. After thinking about it for a moment, he concluded that the main reason for this uneasiness was probably because Ji Xinyue was not by his side, and Huang Xie and Yun Che were watching him from somewhere. He was still worried about her. Forget it, I'd better go find that girl early tomorrow. In this moment of danger, if he didn't keep her by his side to protect her, he wouldn't feel at ease. Right now, he had to cultivate to recover. He closed his eyes and forced himself to meditate and cultivate. His original plan was to meditate for 8 hours and leave as soon as the sky brightened. However, because of his uneasiness, he only meditated for 6 hours before waking up. Chapter 3070. As soon as he woke up, he panicked as if something had happened. He couldn't sit still anymore, so he got up and opened the door of the mystic realm. When he walked out, he saw Yunxi pacing back and forth outside the door, looking as if she couldn't decide whether to call him or not. When she saw him come out, Yunxi's eyes lit up and she walked up to him. "Have you fully recovered?" Rongyue Tianlan nodded and didn't beat around the bush. "Is there anything you need from me? Has anyone been looking for me during this time?" Yunxi paused and said, "There was someone looking for you just now," but her voice was too coquettish. She didn't sound like a normal woman. In fact, she was still holding back. Ji Xinyue's voice at the time couldn't be described as coquettish. It was dripping like a coquettish hostess inviting a guest. Indeed, she didn't sound like a proper woman. Yunxi felt that with Rongyue Tianlan's taste, he shouldn't be acquainted with such a woman. However, this woman had a voice transmission talisman with Rongyue Tianlan, so they should know each other. At the time, Ji Xinyue hadn't said why she was looking for Rongyue Tianlan. She had only said that she was looking for His Highness Rongyue in a coquettish voice. Her soft, dripping, and even slightly panting voice had successfully given Yunxi goosebumps. After the other party had hung up, she was stunned for a moment. She couldn't guess who the other party was, but she was afraid of delaying Rongyue Tianlan's matter. Therefore, after thinking about it, she contacted the other party again, wanting to ask about the other party's identity. However, the other party couldn't get through no matter what. She wasn't sure if this was an accident, so when she arrived at Rongyue Tianlan's cultivation place, she wasn't sure if she should inform Rongyue Tianlan in time. After all, it was taboo to disturb him when he was cultivating. Just as she was pacing back and forth, Rongyue Tianlan came out by himself. Yunshi told him about the situation just now and took out the voice transmission talisman to show Rongyue Tianlan. Rongyue Tianlan's expression changed. Yunshi, didn't I tell you that this voice transmission talisman is connected to Ji Shenyue? You have to inform me immediately whenever this voice transmission talisman contacts me. His voice couldn't help but carry a touch of anger. Yunshi was stunned. Didn't you say that Miss Ji Shenyue was a straightforward heroine? But that person's words weren't just any ordinary coquettish. How could a female hero speak so softly? Rongyue glanced at her and almost wanted to rub her forehead. After all, this sound-transmitting talisman was connected to a sound-transmitting talisman. If there were no accidents, Ji Shenyue would not lend this sound-transmitting talisman to others, nor would she lose it. Now that this voice transmission talisman had suddenly sent a message in the middle of the night, regardless of whether it was her or not, it meant that there was something wrong on her side. He couldn't be bothered to explain too much to Yunshi. Instead, he immediately used the blue voice transmission talisman to contact the other side. However, there was no more movement from the other side. Something might have really happened to her. He pondered for a moment and immediately contacted Sect Master Ziyun. Sect Master Ziyun was not slow in picking up the call and immediately contacted him. Rongyue Tianlan did not beat around the bush and immediately asked about Ji Shenyu's whereabouts. Sect Master Ziyun paused for a moment. When Shenyu returned last night, it was already quite late. She should still be resting at this moment. Rongyue Tianlan said, I'm looking for her for something urgent. Let her get up and answer my sound-transmitting talisman. Sect Master Ziyun yawned and said, the sun is not even up yet. Your Highness Rongyue, why do you have to look for me at this time? Let's wait until she wakes up in the morning. She's not answering your sound-transmitting talisman right now. This means that she's too tired to answer. It's better not to disturb her at this time. Chapter 3071. There didn't seem to be any flaws in his words. Rongyue Tianlan paused for a moment and suddenly asked casually, Sect leader, where are you now? I just woke up. What's the matter? I've been a little bored recently. How about I find you for a game of chess today? You're looking for Shenyu, aren't you? You're using me as a cover. You've seen through me. I'll teleport to your place to look for her. She'll probably be up when I arrive. Don't tell her, I want to give her a surprise. The person on the other side paused for a moment. Rongyue, can you change your temperament of acting on whatever you say? Teleporting consumes a lot of telekinesis. Just to see her? Wouldn't this show more sincerity and make her feel more touched? Shenyu isn't such a person. If you use that method, she might think that you don't know what's important and won't accept you, Rongyue Tianlan sighed. You're her master, so you know her best. Forget it, I'll ride the cloud over in a while. I'll probably reach your place in 8 hours. You should prepare to receive me with delicacies. The other side seemed to be relieved. Okay. He then added, there's no need to rush. Shenyu will be staying here for a few days, so you'll be able to see her in these 2 days. The two of them chatted happily as usual and hung up after talking for a while. Yunshi, who had been listening by the side, also heaved a sigh of relief. I told you she'll be fine. She suddenly paused and looked at Rongyue Tianlan. What's wrong with you? You don't look too good. Rongyue Tianlan's handsome face sank the moment he hung up the sound transmission talisman. When he heard Yunshi's question, he only said briefly, something happened over there. Yunshi, I'm going out for a while. Help yourself. After he finished speaking, he was already gone. Yunshi was speechless. She didn't hear anything unusual. Why did Rongyue Tianlan run away in such a hurry? The technique he used was the shrinking earth technique. The shrinking ground technique was even more powerful than the ability to travel 1,000 miles in an instant. It could allow one to travel 1,000 miles in an instant. This place was originally 10,000 miles away from Ziyun sect, but if Tianlan used this kind of technique, she would be able to reach it in less than an hour. Of course, it also consumed a lot of psychokinesis. It seemed like he was really nervous about Ji Xinyu. He also had someone he liked. I'm the only one left. Rongyue Tianlan had only talked to Grandmaster Ziyun for a short while, but she had already found two suspicious points. Firstly, when Sect Master Ziyun was talking to him, Rong Yuishenlin could faintly hear the sound of wind blowing through the forest. In other words, Sect Master Ziyun was outside at that time. But as soon as he got up, a person who woke up early should be full of energy, but Sect Master Ziyun's voice carried a trace of exhaustion, as if he had not slept the entire night. Secondly, Grandmaster Ziyun was actually an impatient person and did not care about others. Most of the time, he was idle and bored. At that time, when Rongyue Tianlan wanted to play chess with him, he did not refuse and often urged him to go quickly. He had never thought that he would exhaust his psyche power. However, this time, he had been thinking of ways to avoid letting him go early. Of course, the voice transmission that Yunxi received was even stranger. Rongyue Tianlan had clearly used that sound transmission talisman to talk to Ji Xinyu last night. At that time, she had said that she was going to rest, so the sound transmission talisman could not have been lost. Then what was the strange female voice that Yunxi received? Something had happened. Chapter 3072. He was afraid that something had really happened to Ji Xinyu. He tried to contact Ji Xinyu a few more times while he was on his way, but there was no response. Rong Yuishenlin made up his mind and activated the blood-red sound transmission talisman. Although the blood-red sound transmission talisman had a powerful positioning function, it had a shortcoming. It was one way. Rong Yuishenlin could only use it to contact her, but Ji Xinyu could not use it to contact him. It also had a very special function. Once he gave this sound transmission talisman to someone, it would stay with that person forever, and no one could take it away. Even if someone took it away, it would return automatically, unless that person discovered its existence in time and threw it away. Otherwise, once this sound transmission talisman stayed with her for 10 days, even she would not be able to lose it. Unless she was really dead. With this thing on Ji Xinyu, Rong Yuishenlin could easily locate her when he wanted to find her. This time, after Rong Yuishenlin activated the sound transmission talisman, it was not bad. Someone finally picked it up. Who is it? The voice sounded like it was soaked in water, soft as silk, sweet as honey, as if someone was drunk, and their tongue was a little big. Rong Yuishenlin's heart sank. Although this voice was very different from Ji Xinyu's original voice, it was indeed her voice. What happened to her? Why did she suddenly make such an ecstatic sound? Rong Yuishenlin was about to say something when another sound came from the sound transmission talisman, as if someone had fallen to the ground with a plop, and someone exclaimed in a low voice, "Ah, miss, what happened to you? Miss, can you still get up? Miss, are you all right?" Those voices were all from young men. Although their tones were different, each of them had a good voice. Some were magnetic, some were cold, and some were pleasant to listen to. "Miss, let me help you up." "Aya, miss, your face is so red and your body is so hot. Are you having a fever?" "Miss, are you here to listen to music or play chess?" Those men asked one after another. Rong Yuishenlin finally understood where Ji Xinyu was now. A brothel? No, it was a small brothel. There was a loud bang in his head, and all the blood rushed to the top of his head. He paused and almost fell from the sky. Actually, he did not need to know the cause and effect. Just by listening to those people, he knew that Ji Xinyu had been drugged. This girl actually went to look for a waiter. "Ji Xinyu, wake up. I can detoxify your poison." Rong Yuishenlin shouted angrily into the sound-transmitting talisman. But on the other side, Ji Xinyu had clearly lost her mind, and was only left with her instincts. She seemed to have directly jumped into someone's arms, and her voice trembled violently. Give you money, cure the poison? Give me." Give me the antidote. This loft in Azure City had a very elegant name, Zither Loft. Because the city was not big, the business here was not very good. Although the people in the attic were all men, the majority of their customers were still men. In fact, it was prepared for those who were gay. There were very few female customers, or rather, there would only be 1 or 2 in a year. Even if one came occasionally, they would come in men's clothing, hiding their heads and tails, afraid that they would be discovered. Moreover, those women were all withered flowers that had been abandoned by their husbands. Their appearances were also ugly, and some of them were even more bold than the men. But today, the woman who broke in early in the morning was actually a great beauty. Chapter 3073. The beauty's face was flushed red, and her eyes were watery. When she threw herself into the arms of the man who helped her up, the man's bones went soft. The beauty was also rich. When she threw herself into the man's arms, she threw a heavy purse over. Some gold leaves fell out of the purse, shining dazzlingly under the light. Logically speaking, a prostitute here didn't even need a single gold leaf, but now this beauty threw the entire purse to that man. Miss, actually you don't need so much money. The man hugging her was still very professional. Besides, for such a beauty, even if it was free, they would be happy. After all, they had been in the brothel for a long time and had some knowledge. Looking at Ji Xinyu's expression, they knew that she had been drugged. They didn't know which immoral bastard had drugged such a beautiful girl, but he had benefited from it. The man half-hugged the beauty and walked towards his room. Don't be afraid, miss. This little one will save you and make you comfortable. The other men in the building were all green with envy. To be able to go to Mount Wu with such a beautiful woman, and even get money, this kind of good thing was hard to find even with a lantern. There were still people who noticed the red light flashing on the beauty's waist, and couldn't help but ask, "What's that flashing on her waist?" The man half-hugging the beauty looked down, and was a bit puzzled. Just as he was about to reach out to take it, a sudden change happened. A dazzling blue light suddenly flashed in front of his eyes. Before he could react, he suddenly felt the weight in his arms lighten, and a strong force directly sent him flying. Bang! He crashed into a table, and his back was in pain, making him dizzy. When he finally got up, he found that the beauty had disappeared, and only his colleagues were standing there in a daze. Where was that girl? Everyone looked at each other. No one saw how the girl disappeared. If it wasn't for the bag of gold leaves lying there, everyone would have thought that it was a dream. What's that smell? Someone whispered. This fragrance smells good. After a while, those few people stood in the hall, looking confused. What happened? Why are we standing in the hall so early in the morning? I don't know. Hey, there's a money bag here. So many golden leaves. Probably a guest accidentally dropped it here. All right, everyone go back to sleep. It's fine now. In just a short moment, they had already forgotten that the beauty had barged in to look for a man. They yawned and went back to their rooms to sleep. Hot, so hot. Ji Xinyu was completely under the control of the drug. Her last memory was that she had received a message from the red sound transmission talisman while she was breaking into the building. However, she was already unconscious at that time, and after she picked up the call in a daze, she couldn't remember anything. She only vaguely remembered that she desperately threw herself into a man's arms, and even tore his clothes. In a trance, she seemed to have been hugged by someone else, and she smelled the faint fragrance of cold plum blossoms. The fragrance made her feel irritable and aggrieved. She subconsciously pushed the other party away. Let go of me. I don't want you." That embrace held her tightly, and then her ear was suddenly bitten by someone. Chapter 3074. Ouch! She cried out softly, regaining a bit of her consciousness. Her eyes were misty, but at this moment, she was trying her best to focus. In a trance, she saw a handsome face that could bring calamity to a country, and heard the man's angry voice. "Ji Xinyu, you actually dared to look for a waiter." This voice was somewhat familiar. Ji Xinyu felt that even if this person was gritting his teeth, his voice was still better than any man's. But at the same time, her heart ached, as if someone had thrown her into sour water, soaking her heart until it wrinkled. That sour feeling rushed to her nose, and she couldn't help but push him again. "I don't want you. I don't want you. If you don't want me, who do you want?" That man hugged her even tighter, and even stuffed something into her mouth, forcing her to swallow. "When you wake up, I'll settle this with you." Settle this? Settle what? Ji Xinyu's heart ached and swelled. That inexplicable grievance was even more overwhelming. She sniffled, and like a child, tears began to fall. "You're still crying. All right, don't cry. Don't be afraid. I'll detoxify you. I won't let you suffer anymore. Be good, don't cry." At first, that voice was flustered and exasperated, but later, it became somewhat helpless, and began to coax her again, and even lowered its head to kiss the tears on her cheeks. This time, Ji Xinyu's tears flowed even more fiercely. She cried like a tearful doll in his arms. The person hugging her was naturally Rong Yu Tianlan. When he heard that she had run to the attic, he almost went crazy. Fortunately, his blood-red sound transmission talisman had a powerful positioning function, allowing him to easily find her location. When he hurried over and saw a greasy-haired man hugging her and walking upstairs, he exploded with anger. After taking Ji Xinyu back, he directly sent that man flying. If not for the fact that he had always been a kind deity, and knew that this was not the fault of the people in the attic, he would have killed him. He even had the thought to flick his sleeves and tear down this broken building. Before he left, he poisoned this building, a poison that could make people forget everything that had just happened, so that the men there would no longer remember that Ji Xinyu had run in to look for a waiter. The woman in his arms was as hot as a small stove, clinging to him tightly. She was actually in a very sorry state. Her hair was messy, and her clothes were half wet and half dry. She looked like she had been wronged, and tears were streaming down her face. Because she was too hot, the tears evaporated when they reached her face. Looking at her crying like this, Rongyue Tianlan's heart, which was as hard as stone, seemed to have been ruthlessly pinched by someone. The great anger also disappeared without a trace. She couldn't help but lower her head to kiss away the tears at the corner of her eyes and coax her. "Don't cry, I'm here." Holding her in his arms, his heart, which had been hanging in the air, finally settled down. No matter what, nothing major had happened to her. She hadn't done anything irreversible. All he had to do was to detoxify her. Once she woke up, he would ask her in detail what had happened and avenge her. The most important thing was to find the person who drugged her and chop him into pieces. What he had forcefully fed her just now was the antidote to all aphrodisiacs. He believed that after the time it took to drink a cup of tea, this poison would be detoxified. Looking at her in his arms, Rongyue Tianlan's heart was filled with a sour feeling. He was once again sure that she was the one he wanted. Whether she was Ji Yu or not, he would never let go of her hand again. Chapter 3075. Whether the road ahead was smooth or full of thorns, he would walk hand in hand with her. She could forget about getting rid of him. After a while, Rongyue Tianlan realized that something was wrong. Her little face was still hot, and her exposed skin was almost pink. She had stopped crying, but on her forehead, the tip of her nose, and her temples, there were beads of sweat everywhere. She lay on the bed, her little hands desperately tugging at her own clothes. Hot, so hot. Fortunately, the clothes on her body were specially made by the Ziyun sect and were abnormally strong. Her trembling little hands could not tear a seam for a long time. In a panic, she cried again, looking at Rongyue Tianlan with teary eyes. "I'm dying of heat. Save me." Ji Xinyue was a little cute like a child, and also a little like the little princess Ji Yu who was not in tune with the affairs of the world. Rongyue Tianlan's heart felt like it was hit by something. He was originally holding the restless Ji Xinyue with one hand and checking her pulse with the other. Seeing her like this, his heart was in turmoil, and he almost hugged her and kissed her. Maybe she was really Ji Yu. Deep down, she still had some similarities with her. If he did not break off the engagement and leave, would Ji Xinyue's fate be completely different? Would her personality be the same as Ji Yu's? This was hard to say. The environment was very important to a person's growth. The same soul in different environments would eventually form different personalities, or even worlds apart. But no matter what she looked like, Rongyue Tianlan felt that she was unique. Some people said that when the heavens created humans, they deliberately took out a man's rib to create a woman. Only when a man found his own rib could he be complete and feel what he wanted. And Ji Xinyue was Rongyue Tianlan's rib. No matter what her personality was or what she looked like, she was irreplaceable. Once he found her, he did not want to let her go. Rongyue Tianlan was a man. Although he cultivated the path of immortality, when he met the person he really liked, he also had the impulse of a man. He even had erotic dreams with her in the dark night. Every time he saw her, he wanted to hold her in his arms. When he was aroused, he wanted to become one with her. However, he was a perfectionist. Since he had the heart to marry her, he still wanted to save their first time until the day of their wedding, after giving her a grand wedding. It wasn't done in a hurry. But now, looking at her who was like a small stove in his arms, Rongyue Tianlan felt that he couldn't wait any longer. The aphrodisiac in her body was extremely special. It was not something that could be cured with medicine. Rongyue Tianlan had already forcefully fed her several kinds of antidotes to the aphrodisiac, but they were all like clay oxen sinking into the sea. They didn't have any effect at all. She was already in so much pain that she threw herself into his arms and tugged at his clothes. Her burning face was pressed against his face and her body was squeezing desperately into his arms. Her breath seemed to be able to burn the surrounding air. "Save me, save me. I'm in so much pain." Her palms were burning hot, and so was her little face. She was in great pain, and the blood in her body was boiling. She felt as if she was going to burst into flames. And his body was the only source of coolness, so she desperately squeezed into his embrace. But after all, she did not know what to do next. She fumbled around in his arms, completely at a loss. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.